Okay. Welcome to another edition, actually the 49th class. In class 49. We have 49 in class with Carr, Dr. Gray Carr. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me say, shout out to the Netherlands. We got Netherlands, Trinidad, Denmark, Switzerland. Wow. Representing in the chat. I was watching, coming in, folk in here since 10 a.m. this morning.
Man, I'm very happy that everybody is here. In fact, my man Wade Muhammad from London, the brother who did the Malcolm X Made in America comics, he sent me a box. I opened the box. He emailed me, and it was this. I said, man, I don't have no busts around. This is a Malcolm X.
Oh, and it's perfect.
Isn't that nice? Oh, no.
The King statue don't look like Martin Luther King. The one
my fraternity, I'm not going to dog the brothers because I'm a proud member of Alpha Alpha. But, I think are there no black sculptors? They picked the Chinese sculptor to make the Dr. King statue. And I understand it from the sense that there is a kind of monumental style that emerged out of China. So that King statue does look like it will come out of the rock, walk over the Potomac, the basin there, and whip Thomas Jefferson's ass. But if you're looking for somebody to look just like Dr. King, you could have found a sister who, in fact, we're going to talk about a sister sculpture today, I think.
Oh, okay. Listen, but I wanted to just say, first of all, thank you everyone who's here. I appreciate the time that people put in on a Saturday and whenever you watch this, to commit a couple of hours to the community and also to yourself is all we should be doing right now. So I'm just grateful that more and more people are plugging into this. And I'm so grateful for you and just answering the call every single week and beyond, because we do stuff even during the week because we're putting some stuff together to make sure that history is immutable. Like this is the time to put those tracks down that will be ripped up. This week I honored Annie Malone on my show, Annie Turnbull, because the story has been told wrong about her, and then they had a whole ass mini series that painted her as a color struck. It was like, this is a lie. So we tell the truth. And this morning I got a call from a buddy of mine, Michael Davis, great cartoonist, great, brilliant genius. DC did a whole tribute to Black history, on their DC Comics on it, since you just talked about that.
Of course, yes.
And they honored Trevor Van Eaton. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. The brother that imagined Black Lightning, Damian Scott, Kyle Baker, and of course Dennis Cowan and Dwayne McDuffie, the two brothers that started Milestone. But there were three brothers that started Milestone, and one of them I met at the Milestone press conference like 100 years ago, right? Because Motown created this comic book, industry, and they had a press conference at one of their restaurants in Manhattan, and I met Michael Davis there. And we ended up connecting because he was doing things in the community with young brothers and kids, teaching them how to draw and stuff. So I did a whole story on him in the New York Daily News. We became friends. He imagined Static Shock. They left him off of this thing. DC left him off. They erased him from history. And I was like, not on my watch. No, Michael Davis's name.
That's right.
You will give him credit for Static Shock, because Static Shock, he wrote in honor of his mother, who was distraught over losing her daughter. And it was his ode to her. And he just recently lost his mom. So it means something. That Static Shock means something. And to give it credit to other people, we can't do that. So this is why it's important that we do the thing that we're doing every Saturday, and that you are the leader of this. So
No. We are shoulder to shoulder. And as you say, the ranks expand every week, and in between the Saturdays, and I was I was telling Professor Hunter, between last Saturday and today, as I'm tuning in and listening to hear about not only Annie Turnbull, who is, of course, Annie Turnbull Malone is one of Professor Hunter's spirit guides, ancestors. She always talking about her, but then for you to bring that to the airwaves, and not only that, but Garrett Morgan, and to expand the expanse on Garrett Morgan. It was just interesting hearing y'all talk about back and forth, what may or may not be known. And then Rebecca Crumpler has slid even in Black circles. I mean, when Michael Logan assisted Rayford Logan in doing the Dictionary of American Negro Biography, which I still hold very near and dear, was published many years ago, because many of the little biographies that are written in that one single volume are written by people who knew these folk. She's not in there. And you would think that, these master historians who particularly Rayford Logan, who occupied the same time, saying, wow, because even the great Montague Cobb, who had a PhD and an MD and was a historian of science, very important brother, he has entries in the Dictionary of American Negro Biography, and I say, wow, but you don't have Rebecca Crumpler. So I'm saying, I'd say just very quickly, not only thank you, but thank you is not a big enough phrase. Dobali, I guess the Yoruba would say, we just like to, give ultimate respect. But ultimately, these ancestors have been awakened again. Every generation has to write its own narrative, to recover its own memory. But what you're doing is showing us how you're displacing the technology in a sense and making it what it has to be, which is a tool, not the center, but the tool. You're doing in another generation now, and people are listening. I'm listening. I'm getting inspired. We're reinforcing, and that's the work. I mean, that is the work.
The inspiration came from you when you said it's our all collective responsibility to fill in these blanks. I'm sure it wasn't insidious to leave Rebecca Lee Crumpler out.
No, not at all.
It was an oversight, right? But it's our responsibility to say, hey, wait a minute. Somebody needs to be here. And for me, it's like, all right, these are breadcrumbs, follow it, because as I'm going down these pathways, I'm finding new people. I'm discovering new people. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, who was the first to do this? And let me go back. And as we start to fill in the blanks of the erasure, because this is really what this history thing is all about. They erased us on purpose to render us powerless.
That's right. And then we allowed ourselves to forget what we had done. And so everybody watching, like, there are new people this week who weren't here last week. There are folks who are going back. If you go back through, find the conversation that we had about Whitney Young, whose father was the principal of the school in Kentucky. And Karen, when you started talking about Kentucky, you kept bringing it back to Kentucky. A lot of my Kentucky stuff is in storage, but I did have these 2 volumes out, A History of Blacks in Kentucky. And I said, you're going to make me go back. And I started remembering Rufus Atwood, the great Horace Tate, who was the first Black to get a PhD at the University of Kentucky, but was the head of the Georgia Teachers and Educators Association, which all loops in fact. But I'm saying that to say that when you put a figure like Rebecca Crumpler back in our memory, she is a thread in a fabric. People talk about America as this gorgeous mosaic and this fabric. Okay, we're going to take that metaphor just for now and set it aside, because we have our own fabric. And when you weave that sister in through the history of New England and a school that opened and then closed very quickly, she becomes part of a thread that's also included with a brother like Martin Delaney, Freddie Douglass's friend, who went to Harvard Medical School until the medical students at Harvard went to the dean of Harvard Medical School and said, either he goes or we go, which is why Delaney had to leave the field of practice in medicine. Of course, he goes back to Pittsburgh, apprentices under a doctor, which you kind of bring up in the Rebecca Crumpler thread. I mean, I have to learn, and often, particularly for our sisters, well, of course, for our sisters, the appellation nurse, which you so brilliantly, and if y'all haven't, seen it, or you're not subscribed to Sirius XM, go to the channel and look at that, look at all of them. But, the way that you expand our concept of science and technology to incorporate the ways that we apprenticed in the healing arts. And you actually weave it in with Annie Turnbull. So, Annie Turnbull Malone. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because these are all threads in a tight garment, in this beautiful garment of fabric of Black life that overflows the boundaries of any one country. And so in you doing that, it's allowing us to breathe, to recover. And once we do that, we do what we want. We're not going to debate. We could debate that, but without that memory, we're figments of other people's imaginations.
And let me tell you, you keep evoking the ancestors, which I didn't imagine until I started talking with you, how powerful they sit in our lives when we open ourselves up to them. So yesterday I did Hinton, Dr. Hinton.
Yes.
Right. I haven't posted that video yet, but as I'm, and I did it because, we're in the midst of this vaccine talk and all of this, and
Yeah.
everybody is like syphilis, the syphilis experience, Tuskegee.
Yes.
And most people didn't know that the person that found how to test for syphilis was a Black man. To this day, the methodology used to test people for syphilis was founded by a Black man who went to Harvard, who graduated from Harvard, again, that Boston connection. As an experiment, they let him in, they let him in Harvard, and they wouldn't let him become a surgeon, so they stuck him in a lab. In the lab, he had to do autopsies on people that had syphilis and came up with a way to test for it, right?
That's crazy. They pulled a Vivian Thomas on him.
And I had to call
your expertise, but we can't give you the title because we ain't gonna mess up our thing.
Right.
You had a caller did what? I'm sorry. What'd you say?
No. William Augustus Hinton. A caller called up who's in the medical field and said all of this time they did not know that the Hinton test, they didn't know it was a Black man. This is a Black person. So the work is important, and I didn't even know the connection until I started. And then I ran into Grenier as I'm going down this rabbit hole, because I'm like, wait, if Carter G. Woodson and W.B. Du Bois graduated with PhDs, there was a Black person that graduated first as with a regular degree as an experiment, because of course they thought our brains were too small so they just let a Black person in, and then he rocked it. So, these like you're talking about,
you were looking at was it Richard Greener? No, Richard Greener.
Greener. I'm sorry, I mispronounced.
No. Greener. I know he graduated from the law school, but what's funny? And see, again, this is why I'm glad everybody, and we're all glad everybody is here, and more people are coming on Saturdays. If you go back through, look at the conversation we had about Dorothy Porter Wesley. Richard Greener's daughter, Belle DaCosta Green, was the librarian for J.P. Morgan. There's a book called An Illuminated Life. In fact, we got to do her, because her father, Richard Greener, that you're mentioning, who eventually became the dean of Howard Law School, actually. Greener is one of the many people who is incorporated in William J. Simmons. I'm pointing like I could go over and get it. His 1887 book, Men of Mark. And that book was republished by Johnson Publishing Company, Mr. Johnson, John H. Johnson, which is going to be important today as we talk about Black History Month. But for you to go back and recover Greener, that opens up, like you said, another universe of connections. Richard Greener, who was in Washington, D.C., Richard Greener, who, with his wife, and then they divorced, they're out of South Carolina. And the Greener disappears from his family. And the daughter goes, Belle DaCosta, changes her name. In fact, the family changed their name from Greener to Green. She then passes for something that we might call now a person of color, meaning a non-white. But she was always vague and ambiguous about, am I Black? Am I not Black? And Belle DaCosta Green gave her a kind of Portuguese, Latin gloss, this kind of thing. She traveled through Europe. We kind of are beginning to know. And I started to look. I had a couple of the Arturo Schomburg books out the other day, the great Afro-Puerto Rican book collector. But Belle DaCosta Green is in many ways a contemporary of him and precedes him. And they travel. She travels collecting books. And then J.P. Morgan makes her the librarian for the J.P. Morgan library. And those of you who are in the New York area, if you've ever been to J.P. Morgan's library, the first time I went is when they had the Magna Carta on display there. Remember they had that volcano a few years ago, and it like blacked out Europe and shut down all the flights. And I got up there because they extended the Magna Carta being there. They were going to send it back to England, but they had to delay. So let me get up there. And while I was in there, I'm looking at the Magna Carta, and they got these Gutenberg Bibles. The history of Europe is the history of really colonizing the way we even think about scholarship and knowledge. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to see it. And that was actually around the same time the New York Historical Society had the draft of the 13th Amendment on display, which was the one that Lincoln signed before he, got his brains blown out. But, I said, let me get up here to the Morgan Library, and then I'll go by the New York Historical Society because I like to see these documents. And for me as a person of African descent, to see a Magna Carta, and there's one here in Washington, D.C., the guy who gives all the money to everything, who gave money to fix the Washington Monument, gave money to the National Archives, David Rubenstein, has done, he made his money with the Carlyle Group, for those of you who want to follow that breadcrumb. But at any rate, so I've seen a Magna Carta since, but I'd never seen one before. So let me go down here. And as that person of African descent, I'm saying I'm looking at a document that talks about the rights of individuals over and above the rights of any monarch, which is what the argument they were having around Magna Carta in the 13th century in England. And then I'm looking at the 13th Amendment, which, you know, legal historians, students of American history would argue, including those who started this 1776 commission, would argue is a natural extension of the arguments in Magna Carta to elevate even beyond the idea of rights of individuals, which in Magna Carta, of course, is the landed gentry, still the elites. You ain't worried about the serfs so much. But then, you know, in America, the experiment continues. And by then you've read through Locke, Rousseau in France, and you're just zeroing in on these fundamental rights, the rights of property, the rights of ownership, this kind of thing that got us in trouble. But as a person of African descent, I'm looking at this one document from the 13th century. I'm looking at this other document from the mid-19th century, and I'm realizing two things. Number one, I was not part of this conversation. And number two, we have not grappled with the implications of shrinking our worldview to assume that this little handful of white people across time and space who didn't know each other, but who narrate in the present each other as if they did know each other as part of some kind of intergenerational chain. We have shrunk our worldview so deeply, so much that we imagined that they were the only ones in the world who grappled with these issues of how to live in a society, and that they were the ones who came up with the best ones, simply because they had the guns and the will and the damn audacity to go and basically fire on the rest of the world when the rest of the world wasn't expecting to be fired upon. And that's a great irony, because it makes it impossible, in fact, unthinkable, for us to conceive of examples of models that do two things. I'll say the second one first, because it's probably the one we think about most. It makes it impossible for us to imagine models that have us as the founders of the ideas. And I mean non-whites generally, and then African people in particular as the oldest people on the planet. And then first, that was the second thing. First, it makes it virtually impossible for us to recognize the ways that we move through the world right now that come not from the Magna Carta, not from the Declaration of Independence, not from the 13th Amendment or the Emancipation Proclamation or any of the civil rights legislation, but the ways that come from the things we have handed down through time and space, the thing that animates the mind of a Rebecca Crumpler, the thing that animates the mind of a Garrett Morgan, the thing that animates the mind of an Annie Malone, so that those things aren't things they learn from outside their community. They're things they learn inside their community that they then used as the foundation to absorb other experiences. But we have, in not remembering, robbed ourselves even of the capacity in many ways of imagining them as founders, imagining their ancestors as the foundations, and imagining ourselves as continuing to practice many of those ways of knowing, ways of being in the world. And so, yeah, I mean, when you mention Richard Greener, and this is why, you know, I'll stop with that. Our work, our collective work that everybody is doing every week, when folks come in and drop stuff in social media or respond or have conversations like we had last week, every name is a community. The name is important. What's more important is the community that produced them, that they embraced, that embraced them. And every time we do that, drop a breadcrumb, as you say, that leads us to the real cachet, the real storehouse of knowledge. So just that mention of Richard Greener. Oh, by the way, Richard Greener was the one who led the commission to raise the money for Grant's tomb. I mean, because black folks said Grant was the general in the war that got us out this mess. We got ourselves out, but Grant was the general when the thing stopped. Let's raise some money for him. So who's buried in Grant's tomb? Grant and his wife. But who raised the money? Richard Greener was the head of the committee.
A black man.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Last week, first of all, I just want to tell you how full I am. The brother that came in from Great Britain, from London, that filled in some blank, you know, and again, our lack of knowledge. I keep asking these questions of my students because the misinformation, the miseducation of the Negro is the miseducation of the person. It's not the miseducation of the Negro. We've been purposely miseducated. The whole world has been miseducated on purpose. And
the whole world.
And so Black History Month, and I hesitate to even put Black in front of it.
I saw what you did last week.
I'm like, we're just so conditioned. Happy Black History Month. And for most of my life, I rejected the notion of a Black History Month just because it's insulting.
Yes.
On so many levels.
Yes.
But this is our opportunity to reframe everything. So it kicked off with the 1st of February. People were like, we got the shortest month. So I had to drop a video of you on my show last year talking about it.
That Woodson piece you did, that about 13-minute Woodson piece, that was sheer genius. No, it was beautiful. I loved it.
Most of it is because stuff you say here. So I mean, I'm like, just carry that baton forward. All right. So Carter G. Woodson, this is the time that we celebrate him, which most people don't even know who he is.
Yes.
Unfortunately. Talk to us.
Let me do this because, and I keep looking around because there's a new book, and Lord have mercy, I think I put it in my bag when I walked outside, and I don't know what I did with it. That's too bad. There's a new book. It'll come to me maybe in a minute, or maybe I'll look around. I'll see it stacked around here somewhere. A sister who was who's born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama, talking about the Montgomery bus boycott and all the people. In fact, Fred Gray, who is still alive, let's copy his book over there called Bus Ride to Justice. He was Martin Luther King's lawyer. All these cats were very young, but this sister's book just came out. Anyway, she goes to interview a sister who she was around just a little bit younger than, but she didn't know, who of course is still alive, who we talked about rather extensively, in fact, in one of our previous sessions. Claudette Colvin. She went to the Bronx to interview. Her book just came out. So at any rate, they're talking, and something you just said a minute ago made me think about this. When you talk about the fact that these ancestors are always on our shoulders, they're always looking over our shoulders, they surround us. We all got to go that way. We're only the handful of people who are walking on top of the earth. The vast majority of people are on the way here or have already gone back into the thing. So, I mean, those ancestors and in fact, the ancient Egyptians, is Mario Beatty, among many others, a great teacher of Egyptian language. And then our teacher, Jacob Carruthers, Theophilo Benga, and so many others, taught us as we're translating the word ancestors. One of the words for ancestors, the Egyptians have translates in literally as those in front of you, meaning you're going to join them. We are all advancing in that direction. So it even causes us to rethink time and space. The idea that they're not here, they're gone. No, you going where they going. And this baby right here just came back from where they are. And we all gonna be over here in a minute. But anyway, when you talk about them being on the shoulders, it made me think about this new book, because the sister is saying, I talked to Claudette Colvin. I went to the Bronx. I went to her place and we sat and we talked for a long time. And she said, and of course, when we talked about her, we talked about the Twice Toward Freedom, the kind of young adult literature, kind of children's book, young adult literature, which was the only at-length interview she's given in print form. And the lady mentions that in the book. She says that when she was talking to Claudette Colvin said, when I was on that bus, people think, it's been written that I was taking off screaming and crying and fighting. She said, no, I got real quiet and I was sitting there and I felt like I couldn't get up because I had Harriet Tubman hand on one shoulder pushing me down and Sojourner Truth's shoulder, a hand on my shoulder pushing me down. And you might think, okay, this is an elder. She's in her, late 80s. She's, adding, she's narrating, which is part of kind of the way Jollies do it. Because remember, we talked about that in another episode. Adoma is supposed to tell it the way it happened to the best of complete recollection, which is why this memory thing is so very important. But the Jolly can have some flexibility. Sometimes you tell a story in a way to inspire people. So you might think, but then she goes on to say something that we talked about. She said, I had them in my mind because we had just finished a unit on them at my school. And in fact, remember we talked about that when we talked about Claudette Colvin, the fact that one of these young cats who's a jazz musician, very promising young man, was killed there in Montgomery. And so those young people at high school, the junior high school, elementary school, have been already energized to resist by the death of one of their age mates. But she talks about the fact, and then she names her teacher. The teacher she names, Black woman in the segregated school teaching Black history, not in February. And that's what made me think about it, because those ancestors, she said, that were on her shoulder, the way they are on our shoulders now, Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman, or Araminta Ross, as which was her birth name. She takes her husband's name, Ross, John Ross, and I'm sorry, John Tubman. She takes John Tubman's name, Harriet Tubman does, and then she takes her mother's name. Her mother's name was Harriet, but her birth name, Araminta, her nickname was Minty. That's a name that many scholars kind of reached a consensus. It comes out of West Africa. So the woman we call Harriet Tubman was born and given an African name by her parents. And then she names herself, giving herself her mother's name when she does toward the west facing world, and takes her husband's name, which I should add, by the way, and then I'm gonna walk my way back through to where we were with Claudette Colvin, is not a unique phenomenon. Certainly in the United States, we see Phyllis Wheatley. But Phyllis Wheatley's name we would know as Phyllis Wheatley Peters, because that was the name she called herself. She took her husband's name. Yes, Phyllis Wheatley was married. In fact, the good sister out there in Oklahoma wrote the book The Age of Phyllis, which actually got nominated for an NAACP Image Awards for Noan Jeffers. Brilliant piece of work. She's a poet. She's a scholar, academic, brilliant work. If you see that book, The Age of Phyllis, get that. But she makes that point. She says, when these Black women are taking their husbands' names, they are not doing it as an act of submission. It's an act of renaming, because many of them, particularly if you're in enslavement, imagine this. Phyllis Wheatley was captured and taken into enslavement. The name Phyllis is the name of the boat that brought her here, that the woman Mrs. Wheatley was like, oh, that's cute. I really want her. Buy her for me. The husband buys Phyllis off the block, and they name her, because it's white sentimentality, for the boat. And Wheatley was the name of the family that had her enslaved. When she takes Peters, she's saying, I'm giving Wheatley, I'm taking a name for myself. I don't, Fatima may have been her name, which is a Muslim name, one of the names. Fatima, of course, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. If you read the scholarship on her, including read Fanon's book, you'll get a sense that, she came out of Muslim West Africa, Senegambia region, Wolof people. But that's one thing. And the other thing is, you see these Black women before the end of enslavement taking these other names. In some ways, it's a critique and rejection of them slave master names that they had anyway. If I'm going to take a European name, it's going to be one I choose for myself. And even after enslavement, you see them not dropping the names that come from their Black families that they're born into. So all this stuff about women using three names, I mean, there's a fool running around now in the United States Congress, this QAnon woman who we won't even honor with naming, because that's not even a breadcrumb for you to follow today. There's a woman on the Supreme Court who we will mention in connection to the 1776 commission, who's got three names, ACB, I guess they've given it for short. But you know who really started that work? Black women in the 19th century. Because when they married men, it's, the convention in this kind of patriarchy, you take the man's name. Okay, but I'm not leaving my family name. Think about it. Mary McLeod Bethune, Mary Church Terrell, Ida Bell Wells Barnett. In other words, they were just, I was going to add the name. And it's very interesting to see that Black women did that. So at any rate, when you see Claudette Colvin evoking her Black teachers in those Black schools that taught her that Black history, taught those children that Black memory, that was one of the things that fortified her in her sitting stand, in her sit on that bus. She said, I felt like those ancestors were on my shoulders, those two in particular. And that is really a little window into not only the power of Negro History Week, but the power of the institutions that allowed Carter Godwin Woodson, who was named after his grandfather and father, Carter was his grandfather's name, to in 1926 start what was then known as Negro History Week, and then engage in a process of spreading that week throughout the schools. Because remember, these are the schools of Jim Crow in the United States, American apartheid, U.S. apartheid. So the schools he was aiming at, the schools who supported him, the schools particularly after 1933, when many of the little tiny grants he would get from some of these white benefactors kind of started drying up, Woodson turned to the Black community, and the Black community was the one that pushed Black History Week, Negro History Week, and it wasn't for February. In fact, that's what we're going to get into now. If you want to read, I mean, you should read what Woodson wrote for himself, right? I mean, 1933 is a pivotal year. Of course, that's the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. We've talked about it many times. I suspect, Karen, I was telling Karen earlier, telling Professor Hunter before we went live, all of this work since we started, almost, well, not quite a year. I guess next month will make it close to a year ago. All of this work is not only inspiring all of us in so many ways, it's inspiring me very specifically because I knew we had to jailbreak the old ways. And as we know, disaster, disruptions often accelerate trends. The old way of schooling was going to go the way of the past anyway. And so this has accelerated it. What we're doing now isn't, just, kind of aimless. We kind of have conversations. No, it's organic, but it's leading to a rethinking of structure. And that's what sent me now into a whole nother mode of thinking about how we now formalize this. So I'm sure shortly we'll have some curriculum stuff. We'll add to curriculum that has been written, including the curriculum the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History did around the miseducation in the Negro. And that will lead to some formal study, some page by page, section by section discussion and relinking and reanimating curriculum, finding out what people are doing some inventory, doing some audits of what's going on already in the country and in the world around a specific text. But so, start with what he wrote, and you can look about that. There was a sister who was kind of a bit of an apprentice to Charles Wesley, who was very good friends with, and one of the apprentices in some ways of Carter Woodson. We talked about that in the Woodson conversation. So, if you want to see the full conversation, just go back through and look for our Carter G Woodson conversations and look and see what you did, Prof, this week on Carter Woodson. But this is a very good book to start if you just want to kind of get an overall glimpse of him. And there are a number of different books. My friend Piero Degbovi has done a book. I mean, there's a lot of different books, but this is Jacqueline Goggins' book, Carter G. Woodson, A Life in Black History. And there's, of course, a picture of Woodson as an older man. It gives you a nice introduction to Woodson by somebody who didn't know Woodson, but who knew many of Woodson's comrades, many of his younger comrades. She does a very good job. Jacqueline Goggins does. If memory serves me correctly, actually, she's preceded by a sister who did some important work, who's older than Goggin, but younger than Woodson and Wesley and them. Patricia Romero, who did a lot of work. If many of y'all had those Black History encyclopedia sets in your house, Ebony did a 3-volume one, and then the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History did one. It kind of rust colored, and there were multi-volumes in there. She was one of the editors, deputies to Charles Wesley, who then was, getting on in years. Wesley eventually became the director of the Afro-American Museum in Philadelphia. The oldest Black museum in the country, of course, is DuSable Museum. Shout out to the DuSable. My very good friend, Dr. Kim Delaney's director of education there. And then, of course, you have the Charles Wright in Detroit. You have the African-American Museum in Wilberforce, and you have the one in Philadelphia, 1976, which is going to be important in about 60 seconds. I'm keeping an eye on the clock and remembering, want to make sure we have this conversation. Because 1976, being the so-called bicentennial of the birth of the United States, was also a moment when Black people rallied the troops and tried to shore up and extend the institutional thrust of the Black thinking institutions and teaching institutions that created independent scholarship and teaching for Black communities. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm kind of get this together. Karen, as we were talking about, what should we talk about this week? This is the first week of February, of course. And we know that this is Negro History Month in Black History Month in the United States. 1976, I've seen a couple of people allude to the fact that, yes, Gerald Horn, not Gerald Horn. See, I think Black all the time. So the Gerald in my mind comes to Horn. For many people, it might be Ford. But at any rate, President Gerald Ford, in 1976, 75, says, okay, well, we're going to formally, recognize Black History Month. It's okay. That's when it moves from a week to a month. Yeah, no. See, what happens is, in fact, let me just let our sister, this is one of the volumes of the Negro History Bulletin. This is from 1976. Let's go to very quickly Volume 39, number 2. And people ask, the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History, now African-American Life and History, publishes this. It was started in 1937 by Dr. Woodson. It was aimed at school teachers and school children. and we'll talk a lot about, when you talk about the work of the association and the Negro History Bulletin. This was for school teachers. Short historical essays. They were encouraged to write essays and submit them. Children were encouraged to submit work. Sometimes they wrote poetry. Sometimes they wrote what they found. Like if your school was named for a black person, some of the children's job was to go and find out who that black person was, research and write it up. And some of those things found their way into the Negro History Bulletin from 1937 through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. By the time you get to the 70s and 80s, you see more academics writing in it in a kind of different mix. And one of the things they commit to in volume 39, number 2, is, in fact, the editor says, in connection with Woodson, the founder, we have noted that our later bulletins failed to stress, as he did, material that was useful for elementary school teachers and pupils. We are now making a concrete resolution to try to remedy this defect. Hopefully you shall see results before long. And they do. They try to commit to that. The editor, her name is Thelma Perry. If you go back through all of our conversations, if you touch on the ones where we talk about school teachers, and I was thinking about that, Karen. I was like, we've talked about so many different things, even in passing. Yeah, searchable database. That may be a job. Some of you young people out there, maybe, we have a searchable database. That would be incredible. Well, actually, you actually talked about that. But anyway, I may not get ahead of myself, because we talked about Thelma Perry. Thelma Perry is the sister who wrote the history of the Black Teachers Associations. I'll fight the urge to pull it out of one of these stacks that y'all can't see off camera here. She wrote a history of the American Teachers Association, the ATA, which was the Black Teachers Association. And she was also the executive editor to the Negro History Bulletin in 76. And I'll just show you the whole thing. If y'all want to stop YouTube and look at it, you can read it for yourself. That's an interesting way of using the technology to get the document out. But she says, expansion of the week to Black History Month was deliberate on the part of our director, Dr. Peacock. That's J. Rupert Peacock, who's a very important figure, P-I-C-O-T-T, and the board of directors. As originally conceived by the founder, this gives you everything you need. People say, why do you give us a? Just listen. As originally conceived by the founder, Carr G. Woodson, the observance would be held in whatever week included the birthdays of the late Black leader, Frederick Douglass, and the Civil War president, Abraham Lincoln. That would be next week. Usually it's the second week in February, right? Or close. But watch this. Actually, let me think about it. Lincoln's birthday, Douglas' birthday on the 14th. What is Lincoln's? The 16th? I'm trying. Y'all look it up. When both birthdays could not be included within a single week, watch this. The Douglas birthday would be chosen. Y'all understand something? Because Woodson was very astute. He said, let me link something to the DNA of this country. And in linking it to the DNA of the United States, because he writes this when he writes his book, The Negro in Our History, 1922, which went through many editions. In fact, eventually Charles Wesley, who I talked about, will be elevated to being a co-author with him. This was the textbook that was used in the Black schools. Some people say, we got to teach Black history. Yeah, Black people were teaching Black history in the Black schools. It's no question about it. And in the Black churches, as we heard when y'all were talking about Annie Turnbull Malone, and a lot of the Black institutions, right? Or the other Black institutions. So, but Woodson says this isn't about so much the Negro history as it is, as you just said, Karen, the Negro in history. He writes that in the pages of the Journal of Negro History. He says, if you include the history of everyone in the world, the case of the Negro needs no special pleading. So don't take 1926, when Negro History Week is started, as the only time you're supposed to talk about it. We'll close with that because we talked about this many times. But this is what then Dr. Perry goes on to say. I'm just saying, if the two birthdays don't fall in the same week, where do we start? We start with Douglas, just Negroes. Come on now. Father Abraham, that's your friend. That's our friend. At least he claimed to be our friend. Who knows? Anyway, we're going to start with Douglas. Duh, why would you even ask a question like that? Now, she says, with expansion of programs and larger perspectives, the entire month of February is now committed to the project. And that's what leads us. If you look at this table of contents, I'm going to show you how the table of contents. This is the table of contents for that issue of the Negro History Bulletin. You see Thelma Perry with the preview. They include 4 speeches from their meeting in October 1975. J. Rupert Peacock, who's the director. Samuel Etheridge, who we'll talk about in a minute, maybe a little. Constance Baker Motley, very important. And Lerone Bennett Jr. Lerone Bennett. Y'all see my shirt. I stand with Bennett. This Bennett College. Y'all still give money to Bennett, right? The women's college in North Carolina, who they tried to say take their accreditation, so they didn't have no money in the bank. They don't have, and then everybody rallied and sent money. And this is one of the things, if you sent certain money, they would, above a certain amount, they would send you a t-shirt. So I stand with Bennett, and I said, let me put my to stand with Bennett shirt on today. And then as I'm getting ready, I'm thinking, we're going to talk about Lerone Bennett. And I said, man, these ancestors, they got jokes. I wasn't even thinking about Lerone Bennett. Anyway. So anyway, 1926 is 50 years after the centennial celebration of 1776. Now, you say, okay, that's an interesting little bit of trivia. We can watch how these ancestors work. They moved from a week to a month 50 years after Woodson started the week. And it was a decision made by the association because the work they had done had overflowed the capacity of a week to do. And they said, well, we'll just go on. And anyway, anytime the two birthdays don't fall in the same week, we go with Douglas, and we extended a week anyway. So, let's continue. So this wasn't a presidential proclamation. This wasn't external. In other words, it wasn't the social structure. If we look at the African States curriculum we did for the Philadelphia curriculum, the first question we ask is, who are Africans to other people? Social structure. This wasn't a social structure. It wasn't dictated by the social structure. It was dictated within Black communities, the governance structure. Who are we to each other? They did that. Now, why did Woodson do it? And then I'm going to come back to this, because that 1870, keep that in mind just for a second. 1876, the 100th anniversary of the so-called United States. 1926, the founding of Negro History Week. 1976, which is the bicentennial of the founding of the United States, so to speak. And it is also 50 years after Negro History Week starts. So they do a special issue as they move from a week to a month to reflect on what they're trying to accomplish and to go back in time to think about Woodson and then come forward to think about everything that's happened since. And when I tell you what we about to do is going to send chills down, it's going to send chills down my spine to revisit it one more time. I'm going to tell you, well, everybody will be the judge of what it does for you and to you. But it's interesting because 50 years before this came out, 1926, when Woodson starts the week, he says this is a brief period of time for us to celebrate what we have studied about the Negro the entire year. And remember, this is what's going on in the Black schools. That's where Claudette Colvin could learn Black history, not in February. To animate and help shape her spirit so that when they come for her on that bus, she's sitting there because she got two ancestors holding her down by her testimony today. And so when you read the Negro History Bulletin, I was looking through some of them because I have just about all of them. And I was looking through some of them, and there was a October 1943 issue. Because I was looking back at Woodson talking about growing up. He did an article in 1943 called My Recollection of Veterans of the Civil War, where he talks about my granddaddy whipped a white man and had him oppressed, had him a slave. Then my father whipped a white man and had to leave and came back with the army, and they beat up the white dude that he was talking about, hung him up on a tree and whipped him. And then he escaped and fought with a lot of people, including George Armstrong Custer. Go look up My Recollection of Veterans of the Civil War. That's Carter Woodson. And as you said, Prof, when you were talking during the week and put on YouTube the whole conversation that you were having about Woodson in that coal mine, and then going to Oliver Jones' little house and reading the newspapers to those men, they're veterans. Many of them are veterans of the Civil War, like his father and his uncles were. But at any rate, I'm going through the 1943 volume because I like to read that every once in a while, particularly February. But I saw a little advertisement. It said Negro History Week. It said the next celebration of Negro History Week will take place February 13th to the 20th, 1944. Persons thus interested should begin now in serious study of the Negro in order to have something to celebrate at that time. The aim of the celebration is not to enter upon 1 week or 1 month's study of the Negro. If the history of the Negro can be disposed of in 1 week, it is not worth directing attention to. Woodson's whole thing was you use February to talk about what you did in May, what you did in October and January, what you did in March and what you did in August. This is the moment. And so that's why one of the last things he wrote before he made transition back to the place we all going, wherever that is. And we talked about this in the Woodson thing, so I won't belabor any point about it. He wrote in the March 1950 editorial for the Negro History Bulletin, this thing right here. He writes an essay entitled, a little article entitled "No Study and Consequently No Celebration," where he says It's evident for the numerous calls for orators during Negro History Week that schools and their administrators do not take the study of the Negro seriously enough to use Negro History Week as a short period of time for demonstrating what the students have learned in their study of the Negro the whole year. Then he goes after the speakers. I got a lot of friends who call it Black History Month because they go from the red to the black in speaking engagements, right? So he says these mischievous orators, as has been said again and again in these pages, have no message on Negro history. What they talk about is the race problem and how it can be solved. He said, don't be talking to young people about the race problem and how it can be solved. They haven't matured enough to even grasp that as the thing. And that isn't what we should be focusing on anyway. They should be focusing on the study of our people so they can use that information to inspire and instruct them to change the conditions we're in. Woodson was angry about that. And now, mind you, this is pre-54, and even after 54, they didn't desegregate the schools. But so he's writing primarily to Black schools with Black principals and Black teachers. So you see this kind of difficulty. And then, of course, he makes transition at the house down here on 9th Street in D.C., April 1950. 26 years later, and 50 years after they start Negro History Week with the association, and the organizations Woodson was connected to. He was a member of Shiloh Baptist Church, which is right in the same block as his house on 9th Street. They helped promote it. The Black school teachers helped promote it. His fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, they had made him an honorary Q. He said, okay, I'll join. And then here's what I want from you. So Omega Psi Phi, shout out to the Sons of Blood and Thunder for pushing Black History Month. They really did that. They even donated money when they restored the home. They led that. In fact, whenever you go to Woodson's birthday celebration here in D.C., the Qs always have a pride of place now. And the president of Omega Psi Phi, General President, usually is there to make a comment. But in this 1976 issue with those speeches, let me just mention a couple things very quickly. Rupert Peacock, who is the executive director of ASALH, talks about why they had to do this and the things they want to do. And they talk about a Woodson statue, redoing the house, sponsoring national organizations to work and do work. Then you go to the speech by Samuel Etheridge, who was the executive assistant to the review board of the NEA, National Education Association. Why is that important? Remember, Thelma Perry has just written by this time this history of the American Teachers Association, which he talks about. And then he says, I want to acknowledge her because I want to talk a little bit about the fact that we don't have as many teachers as we used to have. Ancestors, Karen, watch this. Just one line. This is no time to remind you that in 1954, Kentucky had approximately 75 Black high school principals, and that today there are only 2 Black high school principals in the whole state. Nor that in 1954, Kentucky employed approximately 350 Black principals, elementary and secondary, and that in 1972 it employed only a total of 32 Black principals. Then he goes on through the rest of the statistics. He said, since segregation, we've been taking an L in the number of school teachers. And guess what? The L continues to this day. As my dear friend and brother who I was in conversation with yesterday, Citizen Stewart, they have something called Freedom Fridays. We were talking about Black History Month. My man, Sharif El-Mekki and the Center for Black Educators in Philadelphia is trying to do something about it. He says, our crisis is a crisis. We don't have Black teachers. Guess what? Guess where that wasn't a problem? Pre-54. See, and so what Etheridge is doing, looking back from 54 to 76, is saying, while we're talking about the progress, let us deal with the fact that the number of Black teachers, in fact, he says, this is no time to tell you that the 1972 health, education, and welfare statistics show you that we have only 3,172 Black principals left in the South. Wow. Let's count the number now. Since there are 22,078 positions for principals in the 17 states, Blacks now represent only a 1/7 of the principalships. I estimate that a more equitable number would be 5,308. He goes on. Now, if you bring that to now, around 1987, according to statistics, I said, let me go talk about these breadcrumbs. About 87% of all the teachers in public schools in this country were white. 2015, 2016, that number is 80%. So then some of these research scholars say, see, we've made progress. Okay, first of all, where are you starting from? Because these Black teachers in the South and all over the country in segregated schools, they did not want to lose the quality of their curriculum. They did not want to lose the concern for their students. What they wanted to end was apartheid, the laws. Don't think they were dreaming of sitting next to your daughter in class or your son in class, and that was going to make them smarter. I put the best Black schools up against, and you talked about that when you mentioned Paul Laurence Dunbar. in DC. And we talked about that when we talked about Paul Laurence Dunbar of Little Rock, reading of The Long Shadow of Little Rock, Daisy Bates' book, where you see the Little Rock Nine came out to segregated schools. They were champion students. So you put the best against the best, we win every time. So they weren't trying to do anything other than give us our resources, give us the legal protection that we have as being part of this country. And, but wait a minute. Wait, we're losing principalships. We're losing teachers. Whoa. So then what you see is Black teachers by 2015, 2016 make up 6.7% of the teaching force in public schools. We ain't talking about private schools. And what number has now gone beyond that to make that 80% white number decline to 80%? 8.8% of the teachers in the workforce are what were grouped in the statistics at label as Hispanic or Latinx. And of course, we know those numbers. What does that tell us? Because some of those teachers are Afro-Latino. You start calling places like New York and New Jersey, places like that. But my point is this. Peacock and then Etheridge are bringing this up. And Etheridge is talking about the fact this is a problem. But where I really want to go, and I'll just mention this sister right here. Here's a name. Here's a breadcrumb for y'all. The great Constance Baker Motley, Howard University, Judge Motley. She's got her speech in here, The Continuing American Revolution. She's talking about all the Black lawyers that killed Jim Crow. And she says, and she starts naming them as early as 1849. If y'all want to know the history of the Black lawyer, there's some good books on it. I like the former dean of the Howard University Law School, J. Clay Smith, wrote a book called Emancipation, the History of the Black Lawyer. Get J. Clay Smith's book if you can. And there have been some books written since, but the thing about the books that are written before this, every generation has to write history, has to renew the history. It seems to me that this generation is reflecting the general status of the society at large.
I just want to...
Yeah, pause. Yeah, come on.
Not just pause, but it seems as if we've allowed them to dictate to us what our Black history experience is going to be, and they've commodified it. Woo! You just talked about how, all the budgets, all the corporations know that they're going to target Black people during Black History Month, and then they have no money the other months, right? So those speaking engagements that you talked about?
Yes.
In the books that are coming out right now, the white-facing books. Yeah. Come on now, but we allow that to happen. We allowed
we did.
To happen, diminish our situation,
yeah.
Put some coin in some people's pockets, right, so that they continue this myth, right? And now we're sitting here right now, so woefully. I don't even want to say uneducated or miseducated, because I think it's more insidious than just miseducation, right? We're sitting here right now, literally chewing on the regurgitated mess that somebody has fed. And
not here, but we generally are, because this is the clean glass of water. Oh my God. Go on. Yes.
No, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm like, damn, we have lost professors and teachers and the ones that we have are so scared to actually do the work that Carter G. Woodson wanted, which was to further this every single day that you're in the classroom. There shouldn't be a day that you don't talk about history and bring up Black people, because there's no country, there's no world without us. So if you're not doing that, what good are you?
There's no vaccine.
There's no
vaccine without it. You know what I'm saying? There's no even theory of inoculation. The cat Wanzimus, who told Cottonmouther, we see this pox thing in West Africa. We usually take a little bit of it when somebody has one, and then we give a little bit of that to the people who aren't. They get sick a little while, and then they're immunized. He introduced that. You know what I'm saying? So you're right. There's not a topic. This is Woodson's point. There's not a topic you can talk about in human history, and that's all Woodson said. He said, this ain't Negro history. It's the Negro in history. If you tell everyone's history, we don't need no special pleading. No, come on back in, Karen. I want you to finish this thought. Let me show you how these ancestors work in a minute.
I finished my thought. I just was, as you're talking, and all of us are sitting here, everybody has their own little thing that they pick out of the things that you say, right? And Michael Harriet on Twitter, because anybody have any questions? He was like, every week I have a question. I'm yelling at the TV and asking my question, thinking y'all can hear me. And then I remember this is live, and I'm not in class yet, but it's for everyone watching. They're little pieces that we can all apply, and then the question that I ask myself is, what can I do about it? Everybody who has children, what are you doing about it? Everybody that is in the classroom, there are a lot of teachers in this space all over the globe. I don't care what country you're in.
The globe, Karen. I see you sitting there with that beautiful head wrap, and that just looks beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And it reminds me, this is the latest issue of New African magazine. This is published out of London. The brother, they do an annual issue, the 100 most influential Africans of 2020. And the thing I love about it is they never exclude the diaspora. So one of the sisters they have is one who also wears a head wrap all the time, the great Ilhan Omar, standing out there, and they got her right as Somalia, U.S., right? And it says Trump's brave nemesis, Ilhan Omar. I know some people gonna get mad. Well, get mad. Maybe you stroke out and get out of the way and we don't have to worry about you no more. But the point is, I'm not talking about nobody on this. I'm talking about the people who look at her as a terrorist and try on the floor of the United States Congress to compare her with this fool from Georgia. And by the way, did you see the homie Leonard Jeffries' nephew?
Hakeem.
Hakeem said, "You don't want this.
No, none of this smoke. No,
you don't want it, brother."
Yeah.
See, the thing about Hakeem is he's a politician, and we can talk about his politics. We can have criticisms, but in the moment he was giving smoke to that fool from Utah, that Negro Republican, standing with the treason, the traitors. In that moment, he was a black man, and you know how Hakeem liked to talk with his hands. He did this, man, and he kept moving his hand. He said, "You don't want this. You don't want this smoke." In other words, but anyway, Omar, I'm saying that to say that our history is always global, and Woodson understood it. And oh, by the way, parenthetically, when y'all go back and watch, if you haven't watched Professor Hunter's brilliant kind of introduction to Carter Woodson this week that she put on YouTube, and you talked about going down that trail once you got hooked in the Philippines. I immediately thought about, there's a book by Daniel Immerwahr called How to Hide an Empire.
Come on.
Immerwahr is Immerwah. And knowing you, and again, y'all, see, let me just pause here again. This is the gift. Please understand, this is the gift of Black media scholar activists, masters like Karen Hunter. This is the gift. I mean, Roland Martin 5 days a week got a new show. I'm grateful for the fact that we don't have to hold our breath and wait. I'm not, and this is not let me pause. It's not. Everybody got to work. So I'm not criticizing anybody who's in whiteface and mass commercial media. But let me tell you the difference between this. This is the gift. See, I know that as likely as not, Karen Hunter gonna track down Daniel Immerwahr. And you know what you're gonna get? You're gonna get the benefit of hearing how the United States is an empire. And you know how you hide it? You never let your colonies turn into states. Puerto Rico, Philippines, right? So when you went down to Philippines, I was shouting like Mike. I'm like, tell it. United States is an empire.
Well, it was shocking because, I've read that Carr G. Woodson taught in the Philippines, and I was like, what is he doing in the Philippines? And then I clicked, because it's not hard. Google's your friend.
Right.
And it said, uncharted colony, unincorporated territory of the United States for this period of time. And I'm like, that's weird. So
the Panama Canal Zone where John McCain was born, they control that. In fact, the First Nations folk are having a very robust and very important conversation now about Deb Haaland, that interior, if she's confirmed. It says it's not enough. We don't believe in just having somebody who looked like us, who came from our background, in an office. That's not progress. Progress is because she came from us, when we bang on her, she's more responsive. And so they were taking it back, and I had thought about, y'all know the state of Oklahoma, which comes in relatively late. The state of Oklahoma, at one time, there was a proposition put together by the folk, the Chickasaw, the Creek, the Seminoles, and Oklahoma kind of leading the charge, that the state of Oklahoma be incorporated into the United States as a quasi-sovereign state called Sequoia. And they came to Washington, D.C. to try to negotiate that. They were rejected. Now, I'm raising that, and if y'all want to really look up Deb Haaland, because Deb Haaland, one of her backgrounds out of New Mexico, she worked with the gaming industry, and so there's this interesting conversation about what's the name of the it kills me because I teach it, the federal legislation, it'll come to me anyway. It governs relations between the sovereign nations of Native America and the United States government, but it'll come to me anyway. Anyway, my point is this. gaming is supposed to be something that never diminishes sovereign Native American relationships with the states that they have casinos and stuff in. But these states have been extorting Native Americans. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs comes out of the Department of Interior, but there's something, the Indian Child Welfare Act is a separate piece of legislation. But anyway, no, actually it's the Gaming Act. It's the Federal Gaming Act for Native America. But what they're saying is, it's cool to have a sister in there who is from us, but if she ain't gonna do no more than the white people, then we don't care. In fact, it's a setback, because you think representatives, having these people in these spots translates into power. It does not. And I'm listening to it thinking, that's what we have to remember. Having individuals in the space, it'll come to me.
It's not the Treaty of Fort Laramie?
No. It's maybe the Indian Gaming Act. The Indian Gaming Act. I think gaming is in the legislation. But at any rate, I say that to say that the concept of what we're after is really what we have to revisit. And I'm hoping we can spend, these February Saturdays using maybe Negro History Week and then month as points of departure. And I'm gonna comb through a lot more. I'm gonna go back through a lot of these Negro History bulletins to really, as we think about this and can unpack it some, how do we balance between novelty and institutional memory? In other words, how do we regain the momentum of the things that we knew, the things that we established, the things that we've envisioned, and take that momentum into now and apply that momentum of memory to solving our problems in this moment? Because what we don't have now is the momentum of memory. And to the point that you raised, these two books, and you see, I'm gonna show them to y'all, but I'm not telling y'all to buy them. These two books, my man Joe Rouser down at Bridge Street Books, I don't really leave the house. I had a COVID test last week. Okay, I'm cool. I knew that, but I'm not, I try to, stay clear, right?
Yes.
And so, but if I venture out, it's very targeted. I go get something to eat. So I go to the grocery store, whatever I'm staying. And then I got to go find out what books are, and I don't believe in, obviously we use online to do what we need to do. I Sankofa, my people. So, but also sometimes you got to go in to the good bookstore. I ain't talking about the mass marketed commercial stuff. I'm talking about the bookstores, the ones around the country that are bookstores. So, because the bookstores are run by book people. In other words, and book people, the book buyers in bookstores who are book people, curate their libraries where if you can put 2 or 3 pennies together, you can check out the book forever. That's what bookstores really are. So my man Joe at Bridge Street, these cats and Rod, the guy who orders, they're always in tandem. So last night, I said, let me sneak over here because, I got, okay, it's February. So I know what's happening. They get ready to have the Negro book drop. There's a book that came out earlier this week, 400 Souls. Ibram Kendi, who went to Temple like I did a few years behind me, Keisha Blaine are the editors, number of people in there, some of my friends, and I'm flipping through the book. I didn't buy that book because eventually I'll get it. But anytime you start a book on African-American history with this is the first, immediately I think to myself, okay, this is white-facing marketing. Or you don't know. Either you don't know or you don't care. Them are only 2 categories. Because if you're writing about subjects of African people in the United States in particular and say this is the first, then you got another agenda. And I'm not, again, this isn't a criticism because, again, people say, well, you haven't read it. How do you? No, I read enough of it. Trust me. Y'all know I ain't going to talk about something. I ain't read nothing of it. So, if I'm not going to get it immediately, I'll read the introduction. I'll read the first couple of essays. I'll flip to the index, read the whole index to get a frame of the book. Then I'll come back through and page by page go through. And for something like that, I'm not going to read every word of every sentence of every paragraph. But as you probably can imagine, I read pretty quickly. So, it ain't going to take me. And plus, I'm also looking for the silences and the absences. So I'm looking for, okay. Now, when I do get it and read more carefully, it'll be clear. But I'm saying, but what I see is a tsunami of promotion. CBS, MSNBC, CNN, Time Magazine, the cover of Time Magazine next week. Amanda Gorman's on it. Brother Ibram's got an article saying this is the new Black Renaissance. And I'm like, okay, all of this is white facing. And if it does some work, fine. But do not mistake that with the institutional thrust and the momentum of memory, because it is completely separate from that. I'm not saying it's not work that should be done, but I'm saying, yeah, so I'm in there. Joe was like, man, you seen these? I said, no, let me browse around here. Here's a book. I ain't gonna even put it up too close. Jonathan Scott Holloway, The Cause of Freedom. Okay. Professor Holloway, good brother. But I'm saying, let me flip through here. And I read the front and the back and the index. And I'm saying, okay, it resolves itself into America. In fact, I'll just show you the cover. I'm not endorsing this book. You see the cover? Yeah. That cover tells you the narrative. Okay. Then Thomas Holt, he got a book, The Movement, The African-American Struggle for Civil Rights. Now, this is an older brother. I've seen Holt's done a lot of good work. It's interesting. So I'm reading through same framework. Let me tell you about frameworks in books. The framework tells you what the narrative is, what the facts are being recruited to do. History is all about narrative. It's all about choices. It's about presence and silence. What is not being said, what's being said. When you narrate a history of blacks in the military in the United States, and the first thing you talk about is Crispus Attucks and say we fought in every war, that's a book that is white facing, or trying to convince Negroes to forget that as many black people fought for the British as fought for the Americans in their so-called American Revolution, and at least in Virginia, maybe 30,000 ran away. Meaning what? Everybody on every side was fighting for the same thing. What? Freedom. Do not frame this as these Negroes was crying in a Mel Gibson movie for the flag. They're fighting for their freedom. So every generation gonna write some new books. And I'm saying this is 2020. We don't understand that. I know Thomas Holt knows it. I know Jonathan Scott Holloway know it. I've never met Thomas Holt. I met Jonathan Scott Holloway, been in work with him. You know what I'm saying? So I know you know it. Has done some brilliant work. He did a book called Behind the Veil on Howard University, the scholars of the 1930s and 40s. It's right up there with what's my man's name in Ohio? Anyway, all that stuff will come back to me. Who wrote about the talented 10th at Howard? Some important work, all of it important work. But watch this. You see who published these? Oxford University Press. I'm saying, so this is Black History Month stuff. This is 150 pages with the index, and 30 some pages are the index and footnotes. This is exactly 150 pages. You know what this is? It's the marketing department. Do you Negroes have some books that you can put together right quick? Oh, wait, Karen, you muted. Jump in, because see, publishing is Professor Hunter's another of her things.
But this is the thing we have to fight against.
Come on.
I remember being a young reporter at the Daily News, really young, in my 20s, and I went out to cover a story. I don't remember which story it was. It was something to do with Black people. And I remember my editor telling me what the story was before I left. You were sitting in the office. You're not Black. How you going to tell me what the story is in the streets? I thought my job was to go out and get the information. And in publishing, there are very few. I have a saying about Black editors, because a lot of the Black editors don't come from Black spaces, right? But they make determinations about, because they're serving a bottom line, just like a lot of media outlets are serving a bottom line. So they will commission books that they've already concluded are sellable.
Yep.
Not whether it's truthful, not whether it's actually uncovering history, not whether it's doing the work, but is it sellable? Because they are committed to shareholders in that bottom line. And those Black editors sitting in those seats know that their livelihood depends upon them satisfying those white folk who sign their checks.
Right.
It's a hellified, and I have to tip my hat to all of the Black publishers, and there aren't that many of them. And all of the Black bookstores, there aren't that many of them.
Nope.
Because the power is in the hands of the people that make these decisions.
That's
and
right.
They get to determine what our story is, which is why what you do every single week on every platform in that classroom as well, so important. But that pissed me off when you just held up that.
No, and you see now I'm not telling y'all. Now look, I'm not telling y'all. Thank you, Karen. Because first, let me pause, because we get excited, and every week I say the rhythm and the pulse and the tone of our conversation is a vital element of these conversations we have. So let me slow down, because I get excited, animated, because you again have struck such a deep resonant chord, and you strike it from a posture, from a stance, from a position of experience. So we're not listening to someone who doesn't know from experience. I was there. I did this. And then who hasn't also, as I was so inspired to hear you rehearse just in a moment in the clips that I watched this week about how, you wrote because you had to. You said, I'm writing, I'm publishing. This is a multiple New York Times bestseller author. This is a person who can put out, as you said, 2-3 books a year. You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, you reading these, like, okay, this book was written in about 2 months. I'm reading through saying, wow. And see, I know the academic work of both these brothers, and as somebody who has focused almost all my energy in the classroom, who is now moving into a phase of life where I'm going to now return and have already started writing more, and of course, this is really the imprimatur for a lot of that. I understand and respect what it takes to write. And in that 400 Souls book, for example, there are a number of people who, I not only respect, I admire, I think are very important. Mike is in there, Harriet, my man, Corey Walker is in there. It's not Imani is in there. I mean, it's a lot of different people, right? And so this isn't a slam. This is an understanding that the agenda of the white, what Clyde Taylor would call art culture complex, is not our agenda. And so there is a need for that type of work. But what happens when the objective, as you just laid out for us, Karen, the objective of the institutions that subsidize that work, that pay for it, quite frankly, who have an objective, whether it be sales, they got to move that weight, or making sure the apple cart never is completely unsettled. What happens when that objective clashes with the objective of people who imagine, you know what, I know that happened in the past to other people, but it ain't gonna happen to me. I'm smarter than them. I'm going to use this. I'm going to tell you, you're not smarter than them. Not because you're not smart. Many people brilliant. That ain't got nothing to do with it. This is a game of power and institutional memory. And on that front, let us return to the Negro History Bulletin. Let us return to the speech by Lerone Bennett Jr. And let us, to riff off of the sisters at Bennett College, let us stand with Bennett and watch how Karen Hunter has conjured these ancestors and sent them back into the DMV and shook me to open the page to a brother who I love, respect, am deeply grateful to whatever forces exist in the universe that I was able to tell him that mouth to ear the last time when both of us were standing in a bookstore on the south side of Chicago, over there on the University of Chicago campus, a used bookstore in the 19th century section. And I'm on my hands and knees looking, and I see his shoes, look up, and it's Lerone Bennett Jr. deep in thought studying the shelves. And I say, Lerone Bennett, how you doing, brother? What you doing? I'm hunting Lincoln, brother. So the last time I had a conversation with the great Lerone Bennett, who made transition 3 years ago. This is Lerone Bennett giving his remarks at the Asala meeting. My God, Carter Woodson. He talks about him, but let me just get to the point. He said, oh my God. He said, even in the highest circle, first of all, he says, we owe to Carter Woodson, we owe to the association, we owe to all the women and men who are in it, all the work we've done to date. Then he says, even in the highest circles, he says, even in the universities and churches, even in the precincts of the purest souls, there is still a deep-seated doubt about the essential humanity of Black people. He says, even in the highest circles, even in the ivory towers, even in the places where men have read all the books, there is still a hankering after the good old days, when the blonde and blue-eyed God was in heaven and Clark Gable and Scarlett O'Hara were in the big house and the Blacks were in their appointed places in the fields. We haven't made the case yet. He said, slavery and the subordination of Black people are still the dominant passions of the United States of America. I got my eye on the clock. I know we're going to question and answer, but he ain't even got warmed up. Karen, when I tell you these phrases I'm about to read next, oh my God. Oh, watch this. He said, we haven't made our case yet. We haven't even made our case in our own house and on our own ground. He says there is still a feeling in some Black circles that a Black organization is necessarily inferior to a white organization. There is still a feeling in some black circles that a white historical association is more important than a black historical association. There is still a feeling in some black circles that reading a paper before white scholars is more important than reading a paper before black scholars. We haven't made our case yet. He says, we haven't even convinced ourselves. I want y'all to think about that, my friend. But he ain't even digging in the crate yet. Watch this. He says, it will be objected that I'm overlooking the widespread dissemination of material on Black heritage. This is 1976, not 2020. So this is before all the Netflix stuff. This is before Black Panther. This is before blackness is everywhere. But watch what Lerone Bennett warns us is about to happen. He says, I'm not overlooking that fact. He says, on the contrary, it is the basis of my premise. He says, there are images and echoes of Black heritage almost everywhere today. There are sights and sounds on TV. Remember, this is about the time when Cicely Tyson plays in Roots. And they recruit all the Black celebrities and actors they can. O.J. Simpson was in Roots. Remember, John Amos comes off Good Times. He's on Roots. It's like you see all them people that you used to watch, and then it would be like if LeBron James was in Roots. O.J. Simpson, all this. Black American triumph. He says there are lesson plans in the schools and courses and colleges. Okay, 1619 Project. Which is not a curriculum written, well, it was written for schools, but of course teachers have their own curriculum already. So when you carpet bomb the HBCUs with copies and say, teach this, my thing is, I'll be glad to teach this right now. If you ask me one question, what, did you carpet bomb Harvard and Stanford and University of Chicago and University of Florida? Did you carpet bomb Carnegie Mellon? Did you carpet bomb University of Texas with these and tell their teachers to throw away whatever they prepared to teach and teach? If you did, then yes, let's all teach it. Don't mess with teachers. Anyway, he says, never before have we been so popular. Now, here we go. They have even heard of us on Madison Avenue. Black heritage sells soap, whiskey, and detergent. It sells everything, in fact, except the meaning of Black heritage and the humanity of Black people, which is precisely the point. Never before have so many talked so much about Black heritage in so many places with so little understanding. Young sister reading a poem this Sunday at the Super Bowl, when they put down the slave rebellion and tried to execute in terms of employment the slaves who started it. Let's be very clear. Never before have so many talked so much about Black heritage in so many places with so little understanding. This ain't 2020. This is 1976. Watch what happens next. He says, despite or perhaps because of the widespread dissemination of the material on Black heritage, the Black image is threatened today almost everywhere. There's an increasing tendency in all media to identify Black heritage with dependency and docility. Now, you can say, well, we see heroic images. Yeah, but who owns the images? What message are you sending? What aspiration are you sending? This speech, and I'm not going to go, well, let me keep going. He says, very important for us to understand the meaning of this. What we have to deal with now is the bad faith of men who are using Black history to hide themselves from history. One example of this is the large number of white liberals who are leaving the old range and riding away into the sunset of affirmative action. Another, an equally instructive example, is the wholesale invasion of the field of Black heritage by bureaucrats and technocrats, armed with the pulse of federal government and the witchcraft of the new technology. It's no accident that the National Science Foundation made one of the largest academic grants in history, $362,000, to a group of white scholars engaged in the process of explaining away and justifying Black slavery. Now, let me pause. This doesn't mean everybody got a grant is a sellout. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is it ain't about you. It's about the structure that is determined to set the terms of how we think about ourselves. What he's really saying is, he's saying this to the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. He's saying our Black institutions, and that would include this one we're right here, Saturday we're in, our Black institutions have to be the source of our memory, because our memory was never about telling history correctly. Our memory was primarily about using our memory to advance socially. And then he gets into the relationship between, in fact, he says, here it is. He says, in our attempt to deal with this, we must not make the mistake of separating the exigencies of Black bread, that money, from the exigencies of the Black image. We must not, in other words, make the mistake of separating the exigencies of Black cultural development from the exigencies of Black political and economic development. Okay, we got all these great books now written by Black people Oxford University Press? Yeah. Okay. One World? Okay. Ballantine? Okay. So how do it free us? It don't. It puts some money in your pocket and maybe it changes the mind of 3 people randomly. And guess what? We taking L's. And then he talks about how we are losing. This is 1976. He says a whole generation. We are losing tonight a whole generation of Black people. And this fact, which is cultural, political, and economic at the same time, constitutes, in my judgment, the gravest social crisis in the Black community since the end of slavery. Then he goes through the statistics on employment. He goes through the statistics on all that stuff. And then he says, no one interested in the future of Black heritage, all you companies, Apple got a red, black, and green watch, which any of y'all buy, you should burn a hole in your whole wrist and your hand fall off. How in the hell you gonna have a red, black, and green watch when the red, black, and green was developed for self-determination? Unless you own Apple, and if you buy an Apple Watch, you severely miseducated. He says, for the great Black, he says, this is the worst crisis we've had, perhaps in some ways, since the end of slavery. He says, for the great Black Depression, he's talking about the 70s, and the post-revolutionary trauma induced by the collapse of the freedom movement. This is a man, if you take any 2-year period in Ebony magazine during the 1960s, it's a period of any curriculum been put out by these white boys since. Lerone Bennett. And go back and look at our conversation we had about Lerone Bennett. He says, it had disastrous consequences in the field of Black culture. We can see this, for example, in the tone and texture of the Black community, in the relationships between men and women, in the aspiration or lack of aspirations of our youth. We have to note that there has been a massive loss of nerve, loss of confidence in the agency and power of Black people. I'm not talking about Black individuals who uploaded a new TikTok video and made a lot of money, who went viral and then became some. No, we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about institutions. Do you believe a Black institution can create curriculum and train students, Black students and brown students and white students? Or do you believe that you got to somehow worm your way into one of these white foundations, white universities, white school districts, and then white publishers, and somehow if you can just whisper a little bit about Blackness, you can somehow change it? Lerone Bennett is saying, you fool. You have no institutional memory. Do you understand that this was an all-out assault on Black institutions? That's why they came and got your Black behind to come write some Black stuff so that they would then be reestablished as the authority? And that eventually, after you've written a few things, they're going to get the white boy in to write. And then you worship the real documentarian Kim Burns. Then you worship the real historian. Understand, that's not true. Okay, somebody come in to question and answer before the end of February, and I want you to refute everything I'm saying, and then we can all watch how intellectual warfare really goes down. But the point is this, and I'm just saying, I'm just an open invitation, and a challenge. Let me end. He says, all of this, the crumbling of Black popular culture, the use of Black history to destroy Black history, the Black heritage field by adventurers and hustlers, all of this is happening at the very peak of the Black heritage curve. And thus we have a paradox. Lerone Bennett says we have never been more triumphant and we have never been more vulnerable. He says we have never been more visible and we have never been more concealed. We have never been studied more, and we have never been more misunderstood. He said there are 2 reasons for that. One is the systemic assault on our institutions, and the other, this is where I'll end, is the powerlessness of Black intellectuals. Now, I'm using intellectuals because he's in other words, like you say, Karen, this ain't you, this ain't me, this Lerone Bennett. In 1976, 26 years after Woodson made transition, and many people he's talking to knew Woodson. His secretaries, the ladies who staffed the association office, were still alive. They are present. Oh man, don't even get me started. I'm just gonna do this right quick and just give me 10 seconds here to go to some of the pictures they have in here, just so we can connect that to another conversation we had. Here is Lorraine Williams, who is Howard's vice president and editor of the Journal of Negro History. She's sitting talking with the chairperson of the Bicentennial Commission for Asala for the association. Didn't we talk about the great Helen Edmonds when we talked about Wilmington? There they go. You talk about Black women in history. Y'all start writing them history books today, talking about this is the first history of Black women. 2 things. Stop disaggregating race, sex, and class, and then trying to re-admit it in a theory of intersectionality. Because ain't nobody, everybody's intersectional in the lives they lead. But when you reduce it to the categories that we use to divide us and study us, you've already set yourselves up for what Jacob Carruthers calls intellectual warfare that you're going to lose. Read his little 1972 pamphlet, Science and Oppression. He says, this is what the West does. It creates this kind of orientation that causes you to slice and dice yourself with it at the top. So if you want to talk about Black women's history, I get it. I agree. Go read Valethia Watkins Beatty on this subject. And what she will remind you of, as is in the work of Vivian Gordon and Marimba Ani and so many others, and Helen Edmonds for that matter, Lerone Williams. We can start talking about history, and not just women. Black women's history isn't a history to be written by Black women alone. Black community history is supposed to include everyone. If it doesn't, that's where our critique should lay. It's institutional history. So anyway, let me finish. Lerone Bennett says, Black intellectuals. And I'm saying Black intellectuals because he's saying Black intellectuals. I'm thinking about anybody who thinks and works. And this is from in a journal that is aimed at school teachers and school children, at least when Woodson started it. He says Black intellectuals who are, by virtue of their powerlessness, unable to create or sustain institutional mechanisms for mediating between the generations and transmitting the accumulated lore of the past. So, hey, you're a brilliant individual. What you doing for the community? Well, we're having a thing where we're giving away issues. That ain't what I'm talking about, Chief. These babies out here dying. Now, you're not in a Black institution. That's fine. You're engaged in intellectual warfare. More power to you. Any way I can help, any way we can help, no problem. But these people here also don't promote Black institutions, and their friends got their foot on the neck of Black institutions. In fact, they trying to carpet bomb the world with these white-facing narratives to get your children to believe that their lives were all about the red, white, and blue. From the beginning, they came in chains, and they said to themselves, these chains are bad, but Africa was worse, and if I could just be like George Washington. Now, you might get offended, but damn it, think about the themes that you write at the conclusion of every history of African Americans that you write. We trying to perfect the American Union. Boy, you better go out and talk to your cousin. They don't give a damn. You know what they trying to figure out? How I'm gonna pay this damn light bill. But anyway, let me continue. Finally, he says, watch this. Lerone Bennett says, we've made a great deal of progress in this area, primarily because of the work of the association. That means translating from to generation to generation. He says, but it is still true that the media and mechanisms for transmitting Black heritage in schools and communities are controlled by aliens, it's his word, and adversaries who feed on our transcendence and create massive short circuits in the flowing currents between the generations. And this fact and its corollary, a system of racism armed with the new power, it's 1976, the new power of technology and electronic gadgetry, pose a challenge of historic proportions to the advocates of Black heritage, who must now enlarge their scope and finally create new paradigms which cannot be co-opted or debased. I ain't even read the whole thing. Now, tell me if he wasn't saying what you saying. You didn't even know, Karen. And y'all, she didn't know that?
Hold that book up again, please.
Yes. This is one of the bound editions.
Book can't nobody get a gift for cost $1,000.
Well, actually, you probably won't be a fact. But here's the problem, though: the Negro History Bulletin from Negro History Bulletin from. In fact, let me just because we need to read this whole thing. This is Lerone Bennett Jr.'s remarks. If you pause, you'll be able to read them for yourself. That's page 1. I'll come over here. Lerone Bennett Jr.
Gotta do that.
From Morehouse College out of Mississippi. Lerone Bennett Jr., the man for Ebony Magazine for 2 generations. Lerone Bennett Jr. This is the speech. Again, y'all can pause and look at it for yourselves. This is the speech.
Your fingers.
Oh, yeah, my bad. Oh, man, my bad. Oops.
Right. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Y'all can read it for yourselves because guess what? That's just some highlights.
Yes.
That's just some highlights. Now, the thing about it is most of these speeches are like 2 pages, 2 or 3 pages. These are excerpts. So there's a couple of things. And I want to be very, my bad. Let me stand up so I can see.
So where can we get the whole text?
Well, here's the challenge, and this is the real challenge. Now, once I do this, I got those two columns. Let me get the last column here.
All right, thank you.
And you're welcome. All right, I'm about to sit down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here's the challenge. Man, I'm sorry, Karen. This is here's the challenge. People ask me all the time. They ask now. They always ask, even now. Where can you get all this stuff? And I was very fortunate to be apprenticed by book people, book women and book men. So Unimulzac Liberation Bookstore used to be in Harlem, Malcolm X Boulevard. Charles Blockson, I worked for Mr. Blockson, the bibliophile. That's how I met Dorothy Porter. And so I knew from relatively young age, my early 20s really is when I got really, that, you need to own the materials. And so I've never had a job, where, you get a whole lot of money, but what little money I had, I spent it on materials. And when I was coming of age, you could still get stuff. Now the internet has made it virtually impossible. But now we're in another phase, the phase of digitization, this kind of thing. And what you'll see is that there is a mafia when it comes to Black knowledge. They come like Greeks bearing gifts. Can we digitize your entire papers? And then we will give you a copy. Okay. And you can keep the originals. They kind of do that too, right? Sometimes. Or you give us all your papers. We'll digitize them. We'll keep them here because we have the facilities to preserve them and give you digital access. Then you look up and some shit's behind a firewall. What? Or you have to be affiliated with the university or the institution. Oh. Or you have to get a grant which gives you access, unlimited access, and the rest of us can get a peek at something. Okay. See, if past is prelude, there's going to be a retreat behind these walls of our archive. And then now the archive will allow some of us to curate it. We've seen some incredible work in the last 20, 30 years by Black folk who are in those archives, who have access to those institutions, but it's also reinforcing the power of those institutions. And now what we're also seeing, what we began seeing maybe even, 2 generations ago, certainly seeing it great now, you see a lot of non-Black people who are students in these spaces, graduate students, undergraduate students, really plumbing the depth of those archives. And now they're the authorities. They're writing. I mentioned a couple of the books. As one on Lerone Bennett in Ebony magazine that came out very recently. Fine white scholar who's doing, I ain't got nothing against her, brother. In fact, I talked about it. When y'all go back and look at Lerone Bennett, y'all can see no problem. But that ain't what Lerone Bennett was doing. Let's be clear. So when you ask, where can you get it? The Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History publishes, now called the African-American History Bulletin, the Afro-American History Bulletin. They still publish it. Theoretically, they should have every volume of every issue from the beginning of 1937 to now. I expect that they do. I know that there are libraries around the country, places like Emory University, which has Carr G Woodson's personal library because they could write the check. Places perhaps like the University of Chicago, which took over the publication of the Journal of Afro-American History now, the Journal of Negro History, when Woodson started it, started the year after he started the association in 1915 at the Wabash Avenue branch of the colored YMCA there in Chicago. But U of Chicago publishes it now, and they have all the archives. And if you want to read any article in the Journal of Negro History, now the Journal of Afro-American History, you absolutely can do it online if you have a subscription to JSTOR, the firewall, the paywall. So here's our conundrum. Let me end here with this on this observations question. Where can we get it? My determination is to be one of those people in this in our generation who goes out swinging with both fists, contributing to independent, physical Black institutions. And I'm not talking about HBCUs. Okay, I'm entering a very delicate conversation here. The Moreland Spingarn collection at Howard University, one of the largest repositories of Africana, singly unique in the world. Very important. Give stuff to them. Absolutely. Same thing with my friends and brothers and sisters down there at Atlanta University in the Woodruff Library, the collective archive of the Atlanta University Center. Same thing at Wilberforce, for example. Wilberforce, which is where the bust of Richard Allen that was sculpted by the great sculptress Edmonia Lewis for the 1876 centennial of the United States that was held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's where the Richard Allen bust was. Apparently they contracted her to build a monument to Richard Allen that never made it to Philadelphia. The only thing survives from it is the bust, and the bust was at Wilberforce for years. They didn't even know it was the Richard Allen bust that Edmonia Lewis did. Then when they got it, I was, oh my God, it's the bust. They then gave it to Mother Bethel AME Church. And we didn't even talk about, in fact, we'll talk about that maybe next week. We'll get into this. I'll talk about 1876, because there are articles in the Negro History Bulletin that talk about what happened at the 100th anniversary of the celebration of the United States independence, and how Black people fought an intellectual war, not only to be included, but to define their experience on their own terms. And they published it in the Negro History Bulletin. And the reason I bring it up is because we have yet to get to the 1776 Commission. But what you'll see is we answered the 1776 Commission in 1876, 100 years after the revolution, and they wrote it up in the Negro History Bulletin. So if you want to read any of this stuff, ASALH, here's the thing. ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, seems to me would have the intellectual property rights to digitize all this. Here's the challenge. I don't trust any Black institution or any white-facing Black folk who are unclear about what Lerone Bennett Jr. is telling us. Meaning, this isn't to be accessed so that somebody, some well-meaning Black scholar, can spin the hell out of it and end up with an American flag over the top of it.
Child.
See, the intellectual war now is a war of institutions. This is what Lerone Bennett is saying. So, like I said, I really need to wrap this up, because, again, a lot of this conversation, you know, I haven't spent the last 30, almost 35 years being broke so that this ends up in Emory or Howard, for that matter. Now, our things have to be somewhere not only we can trust, but where a 6-year-old girl can walk in there and say, you know, I want to write a children's book. And a sister takes her to the stacks with the shelves of Black children's book that go back to the 19th century and say, why don't you sit here for an afternoon and just read through some of this stuff? I'm gonna be over here working, but and here, you know, you got your phone and everything, and you know, why don't you leave the phone with me? And we got a whole bank of computers, but here's a pad and a pencil. Why don't you just sketch out some ideas? Just, you know, I know you used to have it. I know you think, no, I'm gonna put your phone where you can see it. But I want you to just sit at the table. Just sit here. Trust me. Just sit here. In fact, I'm not even gonna. I'm gonna make it easy for you. I'm gonna start with a little book. Remember we talked about James Weldon Johnson and the Black National Anthem?
Yes. Beautiful.
This is a little children's book on James Weldon Johnson. Guess who wrote it? Ophelia Settle Egypt. Ophelia Settle Egypt, a brilliant sister scholar. Look, that's a great picture of the Johnson brothers. It's about around the age when they wrote it, right? So the reason I bring her up is because we didn't even get into this. This is a teaser for next week, maybe. When we go to the 1876 thing that was written up in the Negro History Bulletin, one of the conversations they're having is written by a brother who we will trace back and use to bring up Ophelia Egypt, bring up Lawrence Reddick, who's a very important scholar. In fact, there's a new book on Lawrence Reddick out. Again, if you got access to the archives of our people's stuff, Ed Vrabel, now Black, The Scholar in the Struggle, Lawrence Reddick's Crusade for Black History and Black. Lawrence Reddick wrote the first biography of Martin Luther King and Crusader Without Violence, and he was a professor at Alabama State College. And he was let go by the president of Alabama State College. No, actually he wasn't. He resigned before. He was on the same faculty as Joanne Robinson, who helped lead the Montgomery bus boycott. But there in Montgomery, the governor of Alabama told the president of Alabama State, them Negroes got to go. And we heard that Reddick was a communist anyway, because they already had an FBI file on him open, and they then just pursued it. But my point is that Reddick had been a student at Fisk, and Reddick worked with Ophelia Egypt and the guy who was supervising it, Charles Johnson, and Miss Ophelia settled Egypt. This is the actual document, y'all. This is the actual document. We talked about it back this summer. We talked about slave testimony. This is Social Science Source Documents number 1, The Unwritten History of Slavery, Autobiographical Accounts of Negro Ex-Slaves. And the sister, this is actually the types. I don't really like to handle this a lot. This is one of them joints that I kind of, some of this stuff I just keep out. I keep it, I don't really touch it much. But this is important because what you've done, Karen, what you've done is allow for some sharing. And we need to see this again. These interviews were conducted by Mrs. Ophelia Settle Egypt. She went out in 1930 and she interviewed formerly enslaved Africans in Tennessee and Kentucky. Anyway, the point I'm saying, but now you go to that little imaginary room I'm talking about, which must become a reality, which will then follow in the spirit of Charmaine Hollins, who was the children's librarian, one of the children's librarians in Chicago, who were following the lines of Miss Dorothy Porter, who were following the lines of those Black women children's books historians. By the way, there's a name we may know now. Hopefully more of us know. She started, one of her earliest jobs was working at the Carr G Woodson Library. I think it was the Carter Woodson Library, Children's Division. Then she moved, I think, to Baltimore, the Enid Pratt Free Library. And I forget where she works now. Oh, wait, that's right. She's the Librarian of Congress. Understand, these are children's librarians. You understand? So when you see the Librarian of Congress, you're looking at a Black woman who is a children's librarian. And so get that little girl, give her a children's book, pad and paper, let her play around in it. But the important thing is she will leave there not only with the beginnings of maybe reading her whole book, sitting there, thinking through things, or keep coming back. She will recognize that type of intellectual work does not aspire to go to the Beinecke Library at Yale, does not aspire to sit in the great hallowed halls of the University of Chicago. No, she's trying to get to an HBCU. But more importantly, she understands that the great validation for me will be if what I do helps us advance as a group, and it came out of a Black institution. That otherwise, you read these books for fun because white people still got their foot on your neck. Not your neck. You made a nice little piece of change, but the rest of us.
This process is about the word becoming flesh.
Yes.
You're talking, the word becomes flesh. That's what this means, right? Like we will never lose it as long as each person who is ingesting this then passes it along in many different ways, and the word becomes flesh, and we embody the words of Lerone Bennett and Carter G. Woodson and Ophelia Egypt, Settle Egypt. We embody it, right?
You know what, Karen? And don't move the screen. I heard how you said that. Hey, y'all get ready because I think we probably gonna hear something about Ophelia.
I mean, these are things that weren't taught to me.
Me neither.
If
they were in my hometown. I'm from Nashville, right?
And then that whole Kentucky thing keeps coming back because Kentucky right now, as I mentioned, is like the worst in every category, just about in the bottom 5 in all of these categories. But there's something really spiritual about Kentucky, something really spiritual about Tulsa, something really spiritual about Ohio, as it relates to Black people. And there's, almost the way Haiti's punished, having the audacity, to be free. I'm thinking something happened in Kentucky with Black people that they're being punished now.
Man, you really got me thinking about. We talked about Henry Bibb. We did Whitney Young. We keep coming back to Kentucky.
Something happened there. You gotta know. All right. Q&A portion. And thank you. Everybody comes up. This isn't like that. Cost you nothing. All right. Let's bring this brother in. And he came in first, so we're gonna bring him in first. And he's from my mama's hometown, my grandmama's hometown,
Augusta,
GA. South Carolina, Stu.
This is your people right there, huh? The birthplace of Morehouse.
Just so we are even.
Okay, are we even? We good?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Is that a little bit better?
Hi, welcome.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you. Welcome.
Hey, what's up, y'all?
Hey, bro, how you feel?
Man, I'm good. My son over here asleep right now, and I got the camera on him right now, and so he's starting to like wiggle a little bit. So, but I'm good over here. How old is he? 2.5 years old.
That's a blessing, brother. He's the one that's going to win the war. We fighting so he can plant the victory flag. What's the seat for, Stu?
Clemson. I did my undergraduate work at Clemson.
Oh yeah, I've been to Death Valley before, man. I must confess, I did spit on that rock, but hey, there's a new history of blacks at Clemson. I don't know if you've seen it. I got it around here somewhere. Y'all fight the good fight, man. Much respect to black folk that came out of Clemson with a degree.
Yeah,
because they bring you in there to work on the field. Now them degrees.
Hey, that's real. That's real. I play football there too. So you talking
about? Did you play?
Yeah. You talking about you talking about that double struggle, of being an athlete, but also being black at Clemson as well, and trying to post Clemson and getting into the real world. And making sense of so much that's happening in the real world. Someone who plays as well.
You a son of South Carolina?
Oh, I'm straight up from the white dirt. I'm straight up from the white dirt. With the best food at the gas station. I'm talking about the liver.
Come on, boy. Come on.
And the 3-piece chicken tender.
Come on, boy.
Orange Fanta.
Hey man, my man Cedric Miles, the brother who you've been watching, who's in Brazil right now. He from Bennisville. And my man Sam Livingston in Morehouse, he from right around the corner. These cats is South Carolina. You brothers, man. And again, Clemson, did you get a chance to learn, or you may have known before you went, about how Clemson University is on the site of old plantation, how you got enslaved Africans buried on the If you don't mind sharing some of that with
so my story is a little bit interesting though, because being somebody who played football at Clemson, like a lot of young black athletes in this moment, and even I went in 2010. You have to deal with what we're dealing with is young black dudes coming from the South, from rural South Carolina, who just want to make it. And my mom and my dad is a baby of the 50s and 60s, baby of the Black Power movement,
really,
and Black country life.
Yes, sir.
And Black Pentecostals. But then you also got we're raised in a generation of young black. I'm 28, that'll be 29. But we were raised in the way you make it. You put your head down, you kind of do what you got to do. You go to school, you go to class, you play your sports. And it was really William C. Roden who wrote that joint, the $40 million.
Oh, yeah, I know Bill Roden, his good brother, man, good friend. Yeah, Bill Roden.
He had that line in that joint where he was talking about college coaches, and so many college coaches care about our black bodies, but don't really care about training our black minds or connecting us to our history and to our people. And so I had to learn about and there go my son right now. I had to learn about the formerly enslaved being buried there. I just learned that, I want to say, last year.
Really? Because they don't teach it.
Yeah. And you have black folk that's there, and that's in departments that's really trying to really train us and trying to get us to kind of get involved and get engaged intellectually and historically with being connected to our people and understanding that the bodies that's beneath the surface are as important as the body that's up on the field and in the classrooms. And so you have those people who are there who are trying, but then at a predominantly white institution, you got the power of whiteness as well. You're working against the power of whiteness, but then you also kind of have that that dynamic of a certain type of blackness that is Booker T, that the boys would say.
Oh, no question. Oh, no question.
Who just is just. And so
no question.
Yeah. So I had to learn about that joint a little bit late, but when I learned, that was it. That was it.
Did you have there he is. What's up, man?
Say what's good. Say what's up.
Hey, brother, what's your name?
Say hi.
Jake? No.
Nah, his name Asa.
Wait, his name is Asa?
Yeah.
Your name is Asa?
Yeah.
No way. Why'd you name him Asa? Why is your name Asa, brother?
Man, I mean, I love the name Asa, but then also, I'm a Christian as well, so I'm in seminary. So a lot my life is in the sacred text. And so, man, I read the story of King Asa in the Hebrew Bible. And I was just so intrigued by his kind of deep affinity for his people and his deep love for his people, or whatnot, kind of his deep love for God, and really, trying to really see some things through. And so, in some sense, I felt like naming is in some sense prophetic. I feel like naming.
Oh, it is, brother.
Allows us to live up to something and live out something that came before us. And so,
brother,
I named him Asa because I wanted him to live up and live out something.
Baba. And let me tell you something, young Asa. Let me tell you something. I'm telling your father, really, and we telling the world. He done already told the world. You're telling the world with your name. One of the most powerful educators, and I know you know this too. One of the most powerful educators, most powerful teachers I ever had, and many of us ever had. There's a brother from Texas. His name was Asa. His name was Asa Hilliard III.
Wow.
His mother, prophetess in the Pentecostal tradition.
Hey, I'm Pentecostal.
Come on, brother. This is what I'm saying. I'm going with you. I mean, one of his closest friends, in fact, collaborators, they're both ancestors now, was a brother who was on South Carolina public television. His name was Lister Velt Middleton.
Wow.
Lister Velt, and you can go on YouTube and watch this. You can watch the interviews between Asa Hilliard and Lister Velt, who had a show called For the People.
Wow.
It was on South Carolina public television. You can see Asa. Asa can watch Asa breaking down Egypt, breaking down the history. And I'll end with this. We just had a conference, Brother Bernard Gallman, Mike Harriet, who you see, he's from South Carolina. All y'all,
South Carolina got him now.
Y'all got the cats, man.
Hey, South Carolina got him,
brother. But when I tell you that show that came out of South Carolina went around the country, that show changed. Lister Velt Middleton in South Carolina was the only one to sit down and have long interviews with Sheikh Anta Diop when he came to the United States. But those conversations between Lister Velt and Asa Hilliard, young Asa, brother, yeah, he gonna live up to that. You don't put a name on that cat, man.
I'm trying.
Wow. Oh,
yeah, man.
Come on,
man.
Yeah, beautiful. So, did you have a question?
Yeah.
You get back to daddy duty because I should not be contained.
Hey, really. So I'm at Emory University right now.
You're Emory, yes.
Yeah, I'm at the Divinity School at Emory, and I'm taking a Black literature class with Dr. Michelle Wright.
Yes.
In the English department of Black Studies.
Yes. And
she's had us deep in Du Bois right now, or whatnot, and I'm doing a little teaching on Du Bois next week. And and one of the things, man, I'm wondering, what does it mean in some sense? What does it mean for us? We're really two-part question. What does it mean for us to recover, a deep love and conversation with and listening to Black text, but also particularly listening to Du Bois, Souls of Black Folk, and reading of the meaning of progress in a post-Trump society.
Ooh, okay, real quick.
I know that's loaded. No,
real quick.
That's a lot.
I'm thinking, this is the Michelle Wright that wrote The Physics of Blackness. I think so. Yeah, Physics of Blackness. I think, and I forget the name of her first book because I got them both around here somewhere. I think when we think of Du Bois, and as you're working through Du Bois, and like you say, Du Bois puts those essays together, many of which, as you know, are published other places. In 1903, puts that Souls of Black Folk together, and much of it is in conversation with white publics. So, the whole fascination, for example, with double consciousness. And Du Bois lives another 60 years. The idea is that the Du Bois that is most useful in the conversations we've had now, at least in white-facing conversations, is the Du Bois that they freeze in 1903. The double consciousness idea. The idea, what does it mean on the meaning of progress, as you say? Du Bois is always trying to write the history of Africans in the world in whatever he's writing. So it don't matter what he's writing. He's going to start with Africa. And except Souls of Black Folk, he's grounding it in the sorrow songs. He's grounding it in the experiences of African people. My favorite chapter in Souls of Black Folk is really the one on Alexander Crummell. And, because it's almost like you see him imagining the kind of scholar he wants to be. But I bring that up to say this. as we're working through Du Bois, it seems to me that Souls has to be read, and all parts of Souls, in a wider context of who Du Bois is. For example, and I just happen to have these here because every day I've been like tweeting out a book cover and maybe a little description just during February. This is a book that he wrote in 1939. I'm handling it gingerly because this is actually a 1939 copy. It's called Black Folk Then and Now, an essay in the history and sociology of the Negro race by Du Bois. At this time, he's at HBCU. He's teaching at Atlanta University. This is a book, by the way, that inspires a man who was inspired by Du Bois and instructed by many in that Du Bois generation to write the last book he will write in a long and storied career. That's the great St. Clair Drake. This is volume 1 and 2 of Black Folk Here and There. He says, I did this with Du Bois in mind. And if you don't mind, just indulge me for a second. I'm going to go to the first page of Black Folk Here and There. And he says, the purpose of this project is to carry out an analysis of values and symbols that have emerged within Black communities in the diaspora and to relate them to the coping process at various periods in history and in diverse places where ecological and economic concerns present quite different options. He says, since Black communities have been and are relatively powerless, their cultural products are constantly being co-opted for ends other than those they set for themselves. How does that tie to On the Meaning of Progress? How does that tie to Souls of Black Folk? And how does that inform our thinking about Du Bois? And I really would like to hear how you, if you can record it and email me, so I would love to hear your conversation that you're going to have next week. I think it does this. The white-facing Du Bois, and by the way, there's a brand new book about Du Bois. This is the latest one, Elvira Bassage. I got this from my man, Joe, last night too. The white-facing Du Bois is different than the black-facing one. I think white-facing Du Bois is useful to those institutions outside of our communities when it comes to creating this idea of blackness as other than what? Other than human. And then once you framed us as other than human, all the scholarship goes in the direction of how we fought our way into humanity, how we overflowed the boundaries of otherness, how we create Black as a multi-directional overflowing concept that can't quite be defined in any one way. So therefore, in doing that, nothing becomes everything. All right, I get it. But what we really, I think, need to be focusing on with Du Bois is how Du Bois is fighting to create some space for us to stand in the world and speak our truth to the world. So finally, I would say, I would place Souls of Black Folk in conversation with his 1897 speech that he gives at the American Negro Academy, The Conservation of Races, and then maybe put it between 1897, The Conservation of Races, and 1915, the same year the Woodson starts the association, a little book he published, which was the first in the home studies series. I wish I had, I have actually the original. It's called The Negro. Y'all can get a very cheap copy of that. I mean, Dover reprinted, I think. The Negro, where he tries it's his first attempt to write a world history of Black folk that includes Black Americans. And he goes on the rest of his life on that quest, The World in Africa, 1847. That's to say 1939, Black folk then and now. Souls must be read in the arc of Du Bois's intellectual work. And for those who would say that, well, okay, later Du Bois, maybe, no, go earlier too. Go to 1897. He'd been thinking about this actually since he was a kid, since he was at Fisk. When he gives the speech, Jefferson Davis as representative of civilization. Before that, when he's writing for the New York Age, when he's still in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, Du Bois always overflows the American construct and the race construct. And Souls should be read, not excised from that longer arc of work, but placed in that context. I mean, that's a lot to do between now. When you got to give the talk, brother? Oh, you muted.
Okay, there we go. Next week, Dr. Wright is having me lecture next week. So I'm a graduate student, but she's let me take they'll let me take her class because my thesis is going to be on Black literature and Black theology and Black embodiment.
Really?
So they're letting me take a class at the university, so it'll be next week. And I'll be talking about Du Bois. And man, there's a really good book by Kevin Quashie. That joint, The Sovereignty of Quiet.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
So I'm
Absolutely.
Yo, oh my goodness. So it'll be next Wednesday where I'll be using this joint, the Norton joint.
Oh yeah, the Norton. Yeah, no question.
Yeah, with the essays in it, with the modern criticism in it.
Yes.
And using Kwashi's joint to talk about the boys and beauty. And this kind of what Kwashi talks about, black life beyond, public performance of blackness and, black people in pain. Because like Black history, if you indulge me for a moment, man, like.
No. This is what I'm talking about. This is what we do, man. Yes.
Yeah. So like Black history, I was just talking about this on social media this week. It's like, Black History Month, is not talking about, it's not asking ourselves, how can we just learn the names of Black people and remember the names of Black people, man. It's really talking about, how can we be connected to a deeper and longer standing tradition that looks at and embraces Black life beyond the public logics of whiteness and white supremacy or resistance to it. Or whatnot, or Black people just simply in performance of a certain type of Blackness that in some sense is consumptuous. That is like in some sense like a certain type of Blackness that people say, oh, that's our idea of Blackness. That's what Blackness truly is. But it's like really like looking at Black folk like that joint when the boys was writing about Josie. Like, what does it mean to look at Black life from the perspective of Ben and Josie and Reuben and the intimacy and the interior and the beauty of that other world that the boys is talking about or whatnot? Because that's the power of Black life. It's beyond the white gaze. It's beyond the white consumption.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's interesting you say that because, well, a couple of things. Well, I asked you the second one first. Second one, I'll ask that second. That Josie chapter, man. Of course, as we know, Du Bois is going out to teach.
Yes,
he's the undergrad. So, what happens to Josie as he kind of ends? He says, when they just kind of disappear, right? So, Holly Garima, my friend Holly Garima, the filmmaker, he often says, if I were making a film of Souls of Black folk, I would focus on Josie. Yes. And what I would do is I would have Du Bois return to that Tennessee Valley like 30, 40 years after. And I would have him find them. And talk, because the assumption when we leave souls, they disappear from history to the point you're raising. And so in some ways, Blackness becomes a floating signifier for us to imagine absent the lived experiences of Black people.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So for example, again, and this is the second piece. Now be quiet. You there in ATL, or do you commute? How you doing?
Yeah. I bounce up to Atlanta. So I'm cool. I'm the ministry, man. I'm locked down. My wife is in the Air Force, so I'm locked down in the gut.
Man, what's your
I can't move, so I gotta drive up to the A. I gotta take 20.
So this is what we gotta do, man. Karen gotta put your I understand, but you gotta put your email in, because I don't know if you've run into this brother yet, and with this plague, probably not, but there's a cat over at Clark. Because every time I hear, when the cats I knew at Emory, Lawrence Jackson and all them, Larry's we went to school together at Ohio State. He's at Johns Hopkins now. But I came down. I think Leslie Harrison and was down there. Dolores Aldridge hadn't yet retired. I mean, the old school Emory cats, and of course Randy Burkett and them, because they got all our Black stuff up here in Emory's library. But and then the brother made transition. The guy who was over archives, the brother that coming. But there was a brother. What's his name? Is he still over in theology? Who y'all got Black over there? Like Steve Smith, I think. I forget. I mean, because one of my friends, Rosalind Satchel, got her graduate degree in divinity from Emory. She's got a JD too from there. She went to Howard undergrad. But anyway,
who's Black there? I mean, there's a few Black. I mean, there's a lot of Black people at Emory.
I mean, in theology in Candler.
Yeah. So this is my first year. This is my first year at Candler. So I've taken. So I'll tell you who I've taken. Who's back? You got Dr. Nicole Phillips. You have Dr. Marla Frederick. I'm actually in Dr. Marla Frederick class this semester. Black institutions then and now.
Oh, really?
She's
y'all studying?
Huh?
What y'all studying? What y'all using?
We just finished the Black Church and African American Experience.
Oh yeah, Sierra Lincoln. No question.
3 chapters. We did the first 3 chapters of that.
Yeah.
Then we're doing this little baby joint.
Franklin Frazier and Sierra Lincoln.
Sierra Lincoln joint. Then we'll move over to this joint on the Black University.
Oh, my man Bobby Lovett. That was my teacher, man. He was the dean of arts and sciences at Tennessee State. He was the history department. Yeah. That Mercer University Press.
And then we'll do that. We'll do this one. We'll do Black.
Yeah. Julian Walker, no question. Okay.
Then we got Then we doing the new joint, The Color of Money.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. That's Karen friend. Yeah, have you ever seen the interview they did? She had her on the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go back and check out that. Now, Cameron got black folk. Now, there's a lot of black teachers that
okay.
I'm learning people. So forgive me for anybody who's at Candler School of Theology for not naming your name. If you look at this, forgive me. Chalk it up to me being new.
To the game. You just got there. And the play hit. The reason I ask is because the idea of black institutions is, of course, as we were hearing Lerone Bennett saying, so important. There was a time when, of course, you would have been an ITC. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So, between that Coca-Cola money, in fact, I used to kid Larry and them. I say, man, they should rename Emory Coca-Cola University, man. All the money. I mean, this money came out the backs of, so talk about the Philippines and the Caribbean, but that's a whole nother story for another day. But at the AUC now, there's a brother named Daniel Black, Dr. Daniel Black, who is he has a PhD in Afro-American Studies, but he's a novelist, and he has something called Ndugu and Nzinga. It's kind of a rites of passage thing. He fuses it all together. It would be very interesting. I mean, I'll connect y'all, so you can. But I'd love to hear the two of y'all having a conversation around Du Bois, spirituality, institution building, and how we reconnect. Because it seems to me that all these loops reinforce white institutions. So even if the Coming, he wrote a book called The Coming. In fact, I use it for my intro class. He's got a number of books. They tell me of a home. Actually, I had this here. He's not. And one other brother I mentioned. I don't know if you've run across him. They may have talked about him. This is my buddy. He went to Norfolk State, but he cycled through Brown. He's been at Winston-Salem State. He's now at Wake Forest.
Corey Walker.
Yeah, that's my man. Corey, that's my brother, man.
Hey, Corey, that dude now. He that dude.
Corey is that dude. You already know. So have you ever had a chance to interact with him, have a conversation with him?
Nah. And let me go back. Dr. Robert Franklin is my advisor at Emory. So I got to name Dr. Franklin. You got
you got to name. That's the black institution. There you go. There you go.
Dr. Brown. You got Dr. Walter Fluker. You got Noah Erskine.
All right, there you go.
Call for somebody send me an email.
You naming the elders now. In fact, I know Karen gonna get in and bring us.
Yeah, I just did. You already know. All right.
Yeah. So
let me email in the chat privately.
I will.
I just want to thank you. And I think it's ironic. I didn't know that you played football. Super Bowl Sunday. We didn't mention it because I'm not watching football. No. But I just thought that was ironic that you come in with that football background on Super Bowl Sunday.
How about that? And graduated from Clemson.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Hey, man, I know we got to go. And Karen, we're gonna move. Let me ask you a quick question, Stu. The brothers and sisters who play for Clemson, I'm assuming, let's just keep with football.
Yeah, what's up?
How many of those cats followed you into getting a degree, man, would you say?
Ooh, that's tough. I can only speak for football.
That's why I say that.
I only speak football, man. I mean, I don't know. I don't know who went into this area, I don't know of any other of my teammates who went into doing, graduate study work, particularly,
Well, not even graduate study. How many graduated? What's the graduation rate?
Oh no, we got a pretty good graduation rate now.
That's what I want.
We black brothers get on through. We get them degrees now. That's
what I wanted people to hear.
Our graduation rate at Clemson, I want to say, it was like 98%.
Oh,
yeah, I think it was like 98%.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's more than nice. Hey, brother, you're a hero for that, man. Let these young cats understand if they're gonna work you, you work them.
Right.
That's right. Get that degree. Stu, we're gonna be talking, bro.
Hey, we'll connect. I look forward to
it. See you soon.
All right, let's bring in. Yeah, this is amazing. Always, every week. I don't know. It's all very random, as you know.
Oh, or maybe not so. We just don't know.
That's true. Let me change my language. It's not random. It's ordained. No. The word is becoming flesh. Let me.
The word is becoming flesh. Wow.
Caleb from Chicago.
Oh.
Are you?
Can y'all hear me?
Hi,
yes.
Hey, Caleb.
Great. Thank y'all for having me. I'm Caleb from Chicago. I attend the Jacob Carruthers Center of Inner Studies at NEIU. Yeah.
Oh, no, we know each other then.
So I just want to appreciate all your weaving of history and knowledge. Mama Hunter, and what y'all doing is just amazing. And as like, I'm 19, so I'm a freshman now. So I've been able to do some things. I'm an organizer in Chicago, and I've been doing that since I was 12, and I got involved in that. And then I took a year off from this school, Village Leadership Academy, founded by Black women who saw a need for independent social justice, founded school-based school, and they started a daycare led into a school. And then after 8th grade, I took a year off, a gap year, and I studied organizing, community organizing, got to travel to Haiti, I sat in Du Bois's house in Accra, been able to practice capoeira in Salvador Bahia. So this school is just amazing, and just like how they've opened my eyes. But then particularly me being able to travel all across the world, do community work, sit at the feet of elders and folks doing the work. What's amazing is that you still learn, right? So like you still are in the process of always interweaving the stories, but also that to resistance and how we move forward. And my question today is really about young people, because that's who I do, my peers, who I do most of my work with. And I have a question about how do we teach the next generation the deep work of studying and the deep work of reading. I think about Sankofa, and that principle of like, you always talk about movement and memory. You can't move forward if you don't even know anything, right? And that just like the beak of the bird at its tail, so that it can move forward. So what you're saying now, y'all hit on this today about branded activism, the consumption of and capitalization off of Blackness, right? How it is now in the efforts of capitalism and white supremacy to allow for Blackness to be consumed in this way, and our resistance, right? You have to be woke now. You use social media and you put out all of these views that you think are new and you haven't even read. So I have a question about that of like, looking at the legacy of our ancestors, Woodson and Du Bois and Cooper and all of them. I think a lot of the time we talk about their work about in a way that's we brand them, right? Du Bois and the soul of Black folk. And I feel like a lot of their work wasn't that they wanted to do it, that they needed to do it, right? So talking a little bit about the difference of the work that we want to do and the work that we need to do in our community. And what I'm seeing now from my generation is that we want to do this. We want to create this commission to advise the president with Black young people. We want to do this. We want to do this. But is that needed? And what is needed in our work? So yeah, that and. Yeah, I could keep going on for days, but
let's don't go anywhere. Caleb, first, I mean, because I want us to, first of all, let me just say at the onset, well, not the onset, you started. So let me just contribute, particularly for everyone listening. I know it's had this effect on me. You've already answered it by demonstrating with your life journey. I mean, at 19, brother, I'm just saying, and I think that speaks to the importance of institutions. When you start talking about, Leadership Academy, you start talking about these sisters, you're talking about institution builders, and I assume you're a native Chicagoan.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you say?
I'm from the West Side. I'm
about to say, I know you had to make a distinction, right?
Right, where Dr. King came and all of that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. He said, oh, I understand that. It's the way these young people are living. He said, Dr. King said, we moved into these housing project, and within a week, my son was talking back to me, and I realized it's because we all living on top of each other. We can't even go outside no more. Right. So don't be blaming Black people. When you trap them in a certain condition, you would go crazy too. So, and the strength is, of course, we didn't go crazy. So, I mean, but I think, and I think we probably all know this, everybody who's in the conversation we're having now, and then the two of us, where we're from and our communities produce us, whether we recognize it or not. And so I know for me, for example, Chicago is one of the centers of my own development. And in fact, it was a year ago last week on the 31st that I was there at the center. with in fact it may have been the last public, I think it was the last big public appearance and speech and conversation that Conrad Worrell had, who used to direct the center.
Yeah, God rest his soul. Yeah.
Yeah, Ashe, man. Ashe, that's man, Baba Conrad, no question. In fact, his folks are finishing up his memoir. They're going to get that together soon. I think Muriel Ballard, Mama Ife Carruthers, who's of course the widow of Jacob Carruthers. They're working on getting it together, his final kind of book, memoir of sorts. But Chicago, in terms of Black institutions and independent institution building, it's clear, man, from everything, your energy, the words you give, the fact you call Professor Hunter Mama Karen, you came through the African institutions, brother. So do you interact at all with any of the folks like Baba Hakeem, Mama Safisha and them?
I know. So because of the pandemic, it's just my second semester here. But I've taken Dr. Ben Levy.
That's my man. You know.
I took 2 classes. The African-American Studies, one, the intro to that. But then I'm taking ethics with him now. So that's a whole nother world. But
let me ask you, Caleb, has he at all introduced his gift and facility and language?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Joseph, for y'all don't know, Joseph Ben Levy is one of the earliest cats to master the deep study of Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Yeah, I have his dissertation and I can't even read that. I'm like, can you sit down with me to go through this? But
hey, man, so well, you know what's going now. Ask Ben Levy, man. You talk to him. They gotta get you in KI, man.
Okay.
We need you in the Kemetic Institute.
Yes, I gotta show I'm ready for KI.
No, you ready, brother. Trust me, and that's part of it too. When you ask the question, and I appreciate the question, I also appreciate it because I hear it and experience it as less of a question than as a contribution to a collective answering of that question. We build institutions literally life to life. So in a white space like an Emory or a Clemson, we heard that with Brother Stu. He found the Black people. He found the Black spaces, and we build that essay. The destination is where you are. You know, to come out of African-centered K-12 education. And this is, it's not unique to Chicago, but Chicago is one of the few places in the country where you can sustain that, which means there's always going to be a fight. To come out of a K-12 institution and then to go into a place like the Jacob Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, which is an extension on the south side, of course, as we know, and those of you may not know, of the of Northeastern Illinois University, one that was hard won. The Carruthers Center is housed in the Abraham Lincoln, what used to be the Abraham Lincoln building. It was a Frank Lloyd Wright design building. That auditorium where Conrad and I and Mama Ife and Muriel and all the folks from Chicago were at on the 31st of January, kicking off Black History Month in 2020. If y'all want to, you can go on YouTube and see that talk, actually. And I would encourage you to, because you get to see the Chicago community. And of course, Woodson started the association in 1915 at the Wabash Avenue YMCA. Conrad Worrell's father, Walter, actually left California, took the family to Chicago. That's how they ended up there, because he ended up directing the Black Y. It's very important. Conrad talks about that extensively, and we miss him every day. But he's a powerful ancestor. If y'all don't know that name, Worrill, Conrad Worrell. It's very important to know that, brother. But that night, Conrad reminded us, as he always did, as they always do, whenever we're in the building that you're in, Caleb. I mean, once this plague lifts, that was the building that Du Bois, Paul Robeson, Carter Woodson himself, so many others came in and taught community classes, gave talks, organized. And so when you talk about the next generation, I think it is so important to echo again Lerone Bennett from Mississippi, a Chicagoan, adopted Chicagoan right there, which y'all would always remind us. And that is that Black institutions are the foundation for doing the work, so that when you talk about the difference between what we want to do and what we need to do, institutions remind us of what we want to do. And so maybe over there on Stony Island, across from Miriam, from Mosque Miriam, the brother, our friend, my brother, Theaster Gates, the South Stony Island Arts Bank, who has Mr. Johnson's library there on the second floor. It seems to me that Chicago, as much as any place else that I'm familiar with, you have more places, institutional Black controlled places, to do that kind of work You have as many as anywhere else. And in fact, I don't even have to tell you that because you've already expressed to all of us the fact that you know that. And so I'll end with this, and I want to hear what you had to think about it, what you have to say about anything that I've said so far. We having this conversation. When you mentioned the name Jacob Carruthers, who was our Jegna, I mean, I'm very grateful to the ancestors and the Creator to have been able to apprentice with these cats. So I consider, he is Joseph Ben Levi is my big brother. Jacob Carruthers is a father of mine, an intellectual father and cultural father. Mama Ife, the same way. His comrades, meaning Joseph Ben Levi, Roosevelt Roberts, Mae Roberts, Yvonne Jones, all those cats in the KI, I mentioned Muriel Ballard, Charles Carolyn Grantham, all those folks that you will be deeply connected to now. Rosetta Cash, Noel Gardner. I'm thinking about folks like, all these folks, Rickety Wimby. You're already part of communities that will help you continue the work you've already undertaken when you were younger, and now are only continuing to develop in terms of organizational skills, linking action to thinking. And Jacob Carruthers went to Sam Houston College, now Houston Tillerson, in Austin, Texas. One of his professors was a man named James Farmer Sr. James Farmer Sr. is the dude that Forrest Whitaker plays in Nate Parker was in the film. Denzel and them put together The Great Debaters. And remember that scene in The Great Debaters where Forrest Whitaker's character tells his son, we do what we have to do so we can do what we want to do. That's taken from James Farmer Sr. And when I tell you James Farmer Sr. was a professor of Jacob Carruthers, and now you at Jacob Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies with the people who were Jacob Carruthers apprentices, you already know the answer to we do what we have to do what we want to do. Because all you got to do is not only continue in the path that you've already begun, but to continue to find what Ayikwe Arma would call the Shemsu. The ancient Egyptian will be the companions. You've already found companions, brother. You're going to answer that question better than I could ever answer.
Yeah, I'm just in awe because during the summer, just like seeing how many young people came into the work, which is amazing. And the energy is amazing. But also understanding that when young people organize themselves and then they get wisdom from their elders. I think about Ella Baker and what she did with SNCC. She gave up her respectable civil rights career to go work with some young people that Martin Luther King and them wanted to put under them, right? Yeah. So understanding that young people have autonomy and that when we tap into that and we connect ourselves to a global consciousness and a global diaspora, it wasn't until when I got to see, it's Black folk that look like me in Brazil. And when I went to Soweto, South Africa, and seeing those people, right? And drawing those connections to North Lawndale, right? So I really appreciate that. And I'm always thinking about just like in this moment, how young people, it's going to be very hard for the generations, my generations and the generations to come after, to do what you do, right? To get all
because they got you.
To get all of those books.
It's going to be easy.
Even to study is because we live in a technology world that I asked my peers, when the last time you've read a book? And they were like, the last time I stepped in classroom, right?
So what do you do at that moment, Caleb? How do you then build that bridge once you've asked that and they answered it? What's your next move?
Yeah, I'm always trying to figure out what they like. So I'm trying to figure out how do I engage them around the things that they enjoy, because I can talk about policy and foreign policy and Black folk, but right, you need to get real deep and very pointed at what. So you like shoes? Let's go look at some of these Black inventors, right? Let's go look at how Black people created and hold up Nike and Jordan and Adidas, right? You like food? That was my first love. So let's go and build this urban garden on 51st and
come on, brother. Come on.
In this dirt and need, because that's the revolution too, right? The revolution is not just sitting back and reading, right? So we have a lot of those scholars too who would sit and read, but they will never come to the community and put that.
And that's part of what we're talking about.
I have a question for you, Caleb. You said you started organizing at age 12.
Yeah, I started at 12.
What was the inspiration? Who got you into that? What sparked you to get out there and organize at 12?
Yeah, so Trayvon Martin was murdered, and we talk about his birthday.
Was Friday. He would have been 26.
Yeah. So when Trayvon Martin was murdered, I remember we were living on 47th and King, right? My mother was working 2 jobs. She to get us in like those parts. That's nice coming from the west side of Chicago, right? And I remember just a chill going down my body as I listened to the call of Trayvon Martin, and I remember the verdict, and I remember that like the ancestors in that room on that card table, and that we got from Save-A-Lot, right?
Yes, sir.
They moved on me and was just like, oh, I knew then that if it was Trayvon, it could be me, and it was going to be me if I didn't do anything about it. So then that like radicalized me and woke me up, and it shook me up. And then Mike Brown happens. And now I'm around some folk, and I'm starting to ask, okay, where are the young people? Because I see 25-year-olds and plus out there on the streets, and I'm like, wait, hold up. Mike Brown wasn't that old, right? Where are the young people in this? So my first action was co-organized by me and my peers, and it was on Reclaim MLK Day of 2015. And we marched from our school to the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center, bordering Douglas Park, which we just got renamed to Frederick Douglass and Anna Marie Douglas Park because of the young people of my old elementary school organizing for 3 years to get that change from.
What elementary school you went to?
Village Leadership Academy.
You went the whole way.
Yeah, so they have a daycare from It Takes a Village to Village Leadership Academy, and then they prepare you for high school in the city. So
5 years old, y'all did that.
Yeah, oh no, we started. My first trip to Brazil was when I was 8, and I started. I started traveling to Brazil. Traveled to Brazil at 8. We had to learn about the country the whole year. Black resistance. What is the U.S. connections to it? And then at the end of the year, we have to submit a proposal and for our travel. So you don't get to travel if you ain't studied about it. It's called the World Scholars Program in that.
I'm curious because another one of my Jegnas, who is now an ancestor, who was on the faculty at the Carruthers Center. You've heard the name Anderson Thompson. His picture is up there. Andy Thompson used to go to Brazil consistently. I'm wondering if the founders of the academy were not tied to. Man, this is
it's deep, and I thank the ancestors and the universe and all of our everything, because I feel like we're not just working to earn the respect of our elders and our ancestors, but we're also working to earn the respect of future generations.
No question,
right? When we're elders, when I'm an elder, and the young folks say, "What did you do about climate change? What did you do about economic justice? What did you do about protecting and defending Black women and girls and trans folk?" Right? All of these nuances within our own communities and the conversations we don't want to have. We're gonna have to look them in the eyes and say we fought like hell, or we sat by and we let this system run amok over us. So I really appreciate you.
No, I appreciate, brother. Listen, you listen. I'm sure I speak for everybody who's in this room right now when I tell you, not just inspire, you're instructing us, brother. Because this is the dream. When people say wear shirts, I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. No, you could also be your ancestors' wildest nightmares.
Come on.
you are showing us how, in fact, there is a phrase in ancient Egyptian, and ask Ben Levi about teaching about Africa. I don't know if he's talked about that. Brother Kamal Rashid, who's also a comedian, they do teacher education. See, you got to be in there helping with, brother. You in the right place. But I mean, because we need you, because you're already in it. Just as you were talking about Trayvon Martin and of course Mike Brown. So I assume then you part of that crew that was in the street behind Laquan McDonald.
Yeah, and Rakia Boyd, Say Our Name campaign.
Yes.
I was 13 with Black Youth Project 100, Black Lives Matter.
No question.
Yeah. And we were down there, and Yeah, so
Y'all
I've been embedded in the work.
Y'all messing them people Christmas shopping, man. What's wrong with you? You know, Chicago, the Hawk be out.
I know, and I talk about the teacher strikes that's happening right now.
About the teacher strike. I mean, I've been watching some of that from a
So Chicago teachers are fighting to have a help. So the CPS, Chicago Public Schools, wants teachers back in classrooms.
Well, I saw y'all back up Lori Lightfoot on that.
Yeah, we ain't even gonna talk about her and how like black folk don't like Lori Lightfoot as a black queer woman, but it's interesting to see how even Black people are a part of these institutions that are harming us, right? Think about so the CPS CEO, that title, Chief Executive Officer, but also the banking system of education.
Come on.
Is Janet Jackson. We also had Barbara Bird Baden, right? So like these Black women who were educators, some of them, who then flip once they have power and are using against it. So they want teachers in there without ventilation. They want teachers in there without having access to the vaccine. They want, right? So CTU, you know, they don't play. They saying, if we gonna strike, we gonna strike. And Chicago a striking city, so you know once folks organize. So yeah, they're doing the work now. They're going back and forth. We had Mayor Lightfoot on Fox News, out of all publications, talking about how she cares about young Black people and they're from where she's from and all of that. But one come and sit down with a young Black person if we paid her to. We're doing the work.
But you're showing the power of organization. And as an organizer and as a veteran organizer, but man, you know better than I do in many ways. Man. When you have the numbers, you can make that happen. I mean, and I think about the fact, like I said, I'm thinking about the people in Chicago I knew and know, you know, I remember Barbara Sizemore. There was a generation of Black educators. In fact, Margaret Burroughs, who founded the DuSable, she and her husband Charles, you know, they were at was it Window
House, right?
Yeah, at the house, man. No, see, you know what it is. See, look, this one, hey, y'all, understand. Wisdom is not a function of age when you are a deep studier like this brother right here. This brother we all watching and hearing right now, brother Caleb, man. Make sure you put your information in the chat because there's some people, man, in addition to everybody else you already linked to. Like I said, my friend Kim Delaney, who's at Chicago State, she's also at the DuSable over education. Brother, we need you. Yes, sir. We need you, brother, because you are army by yourself.
Y'all got me. Y'all don't need me.
I cannot believe this.
Thank you so much.
You must got some kind of.
I do have some kind of. So I'm gonna receive that. I'm gonna receive that. And that is obedience to the Spirit, right? This, you know, as I'm listening to Caleb, I'm seeing in the comments, you know, we want to hold you up as special. But I want to say this, that there are millions of Calebs in our community. Unfortunately, the media will only pull out one or two, and Amanda Gorman is brilliant, but there are a million Amanda Gormans. We're Black. Millions. And I've been saying this for the last 6 years. This generation is the one that's going to save us. This generation, the 18, 19, 16-year-olds, those are the ones that are literally in the street. This is not unusual what you're hearing coming out of this man's mouth. And again, it's random. Not really.
Well, no, it's a real alchemy to it.
Yeah. I didn't know Caleb. I didn't know. I'm just like, all right, here's the link. Come in before 1:30 and we put you on. I don't know where you're from. I don't know what your background is. I'm not doing any research. And this is why I know that he's not unusual.
How about that?
Why I know that there are a lot. And if you are living in a community and you don't see a Caleb in your community, what are you going to foster that?
Right.
Yeah.
What's happening? What's happening in your schools to not produce this?
Well, he came out of Black institution. We heard it, didn't we, Karen? With Black women at the center of it. My God, brother.
And when I went back into white institutions, they couldn't tell me nothing, right? So I'm at a college prep school, one of the best in the state, just being like, no, you got to cut out of Abraham Lincoln in U.S. history. I'm going to tell you about this every single day. You got the don't tread on me flag in the back. Okay, let's talk about it. So also just understanding that like we need to shape that too, that like the education system is not education, it's schooling, right? Like it's a different thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm thankful for the education y'all giving us. Mama Hunter, you touching the generations you don't even know that coming, right? So this platform is the hottest thing on YouTube and on the internet. And I'm interested in building with y'all of how we could get young people into this space. I send my links to my folk and my peers, but making sure that young people are at the center and the core of this, because they're the ones that are going to continue the evolution in the process.
We'll be teaching a course in our new platform, Kate. I am not letting you go. You
about that.
That's
right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I love you. Oh my God.
Brother, love, much love. Yeah. Tell my man Yosef I'll be rapping with him. How can I believe that? I mean, I can. I keep saying it like you keep saying. No. Yes.
Every week. Every week.
Wow.
I'm speechless. I'm just gonna say that. This is what it looks like when you raise them up.
Oh no. It's very true, Karen. You know, and maybe we talk about that another time. Caleb kind of previewed it. Chicago, Detroit, New York, Newark, Philadelphia, LA, Oakland, Seattle. There's probably not Jackson, Mississippi, Atlanta. You can't really name a city in this country, in the United States anyway. Well, I say this country because people all over the world watching. For that matter, London, as we heard last week, Salvador Bahia, absolutely. Look up a cat, Abdias dos Nascimento, out of Bahia, Salvador Bahia. Wherever Black people have clustered, there have been Black people who built institutions to educate our children. The system that produces the Calebs is a system that has a very specific history. We talk about this another time. I know we kind of coming up against it. So these are Black women and men. When you see a brother like that, I'm looking at him and I'm saying, I see Hakeem Abudi and Safisha. I see the Institute of Positive Education that came out of the 60s and the Black Power movement in Chicago. I'm seeing Abner Joan Brown. I'm seeing Conrad Worrell. I'm seeing Barbara Sizemore, who they ran out of DC as the superintendent because she was going to transform the whole damn thing. And she went back to Chicago and continued that work. That young brother right there is what Lerone Bennett is talking about. He was produced by institution builders. And so, like you said, he didn't go into the white institution to destroy the white institution. He went in there to say, okay, what can I use out of this? And you're going to get up off me. And I'm going to show this child right here that's sitting, trying to figure out what's going on in her life, what it looks like. And then after class, she'll come to me and say, you know, I like what you, and then we'll come see me on the weekend. That building that Caleb is affiliated with now, the Carruthers building, they had something in there called the Communiversity. So they had cats like Bob Rhodes, who I knew was made transition. He was at Ohio University for years. These cats, man, when I look now at the people writing and talking about Black stuff, if they're not coming out of Black institutions, maybe something they have to say is useful. But if you're not connected to Black institutions, Caleb done told y'all. Karen Hunter done told y'all, you're not building. That literally that building. Ivor Carruthers with the now with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Institute. In fact, when we connect to him, all that Brazil stuff, Mama Ivor, and South Africa, Jeremiah Wright, who the last time I was there in that building that night, Jeremiah Wright came out. In fact, I got a picture of me, him, and Conrad. That's the last picture Conrad took on the earth was me and Jeremiah Wright, Conrad, Jeremiah Wright in the middle. South Africa all day long, those connections. This is
the importance of traveling and seeing yourself in other places. This young man traveling at 8. Some of y'all ain't never been off your block, out your neighborhood, out your community. And the world is so tiny as it relates to Black people. We see ourselves in so many places when we get out there. So I can't wait for this plague to be over.
Yes.
Trips to take, Doc. We got trips to take.
Oh, no question. Well, in between, if they keep coming up like this, we're gonna be in some of these places before we physically get there. They're gonna come drop in, and y'all come on into the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Listen, thank you. Next week, 1876, 1776. The
Yes. Oh,
okay, we've been holding off on it, like Anna Hegeman. We're gonna get to it.
It's hot February. It's hot. What we call it? Hot girl, hot boy February. I guess we could just rename. We've taken out.
Keep going. And y'all pray to keep us healthy so that we keep doing this too, because that's important. All right, I want to say that. All right, love you, bro.
Love you too. Love you too, sister.
Thank you all, everyone. Oh, thumbs up, like, share.
Yeah, please.
Hey, Donica's daddy. Thank you, Kareem and the team, and Renee and all the folk, Yara in the chat, making sure everybody stays on message. And I'll see you next week.
Yes, see you.